Hello, hello, hello. I hope we are doing well today. Raphilosophy, how you doing, brother? It is good to see you. Happy Monday. Leighton, Layla, and Katrina all in the chat. Just built that tree house today, floor of the tree house. That's pretty exciting. And I agree. Drawing picture of it, I would definitely like to see that as well when you're all done. Very proud of you both. Matt Gooch coming in real early. I hope you're doing well. Can everybody hear me okay? Headset working? Everybody like the addition Pikachu? Hey, Chaos, how's it going? It's good to see you, fam. PSA bought back it? No shot. I did not know that. Appreciate you, Brangus. What's going on, Knight? How you doing, Johnny Knight? That is insane. I wonder if they're going to keep the Beckett name and then just pretty well utilize that for the overseas stuffs. Always blessed. Just spending a little time with the fam before I start my stream in about an hour. Let's go. I hope you have an amazing stream. Appreciate you, Alice. Thank you. Keeping it in a separate company under the same owner. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Ooh, thank you, Alice. I appreciate you. Let me pin that just for now. We're going to read two incredible Christmas classics. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the author that is Hans Christian Andersen. They are actually quite responsible for a lot of the stories that we all know and love, such as The Little Mermaid. Even Frozen was pretty well inspired by a story written by Hans Christian Andersen. Special surprise DGen Rip tonight. I'm super excited. Excellent. DGen. I love it, man. I wish you the best of luck that you pull everything you're looking to pull tonight, fam. I'm just going to solve this monstrosity right quick, and then I'll solve the regular one. That should bring us to about that 10-minute mark, and then we will get started on our stories. I appreciate you, Leighton. This chair that I use on Mondays actually has a lot more support than my other one. And so I do appreciate that, but these are a little bit easier to hang out for longer periods of time. Okay, I guess that's easy enough. Rafa, how you doing tonight, brother? Did everybody make sure to go and visit our channel shout out for day 2 of Ghostmas this morning? Pushing for 200 subs before the end of the year, and I'll be giving away a Black Bolt ETB when we get there. 200 subs, yo. Can we get Chaos the Collector's channel link dropped? I know typically Mondays we take it easy on the Pokemonin, but at that same time, 200, we can help make that happen, y'all. And if you're not subbed up to Chaos the Collector, please help him reach his goal. Excellent. Yo, Fierce Fire TCG. How are you doing, fam? It is good to see you. It is good to see you. How's your night going, brother? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know we're working on it right now, but yeah, it's definitely an important milestone for sure. And trust me when I say 500 is right around the corner. Good fam, just relaxing. Found some cards in my boxes when I moved and didn't realize I had them still. Let's go. I always love that. Hey, Mama Ghost, how's it going? I hope you're doing well. Boy, we're making great time on these. But right when we're finished with this regular 3x3, we are going to go ahead and get started on our Christmas stories. Hans Christian Andersen is going to be first. There's a story that we're all very familiar with, and though I don't think I've ever read out loud, so we're going to do that for the first time tonight. And it is called, originally, it's called The Steadfast Tin Soldier, about the one legged tin soldier who has a grand adventure. It has been later called like the Brave Tin Soldier and things as such, so, but we are going to read that tonight. And then I was awfully inspired today at work. I was talking to one of my old coaches, and she was excited for this weekend because she said she gets to go and see the Nutcracker Ballet, and that inspired me. So we're actually going to go ahead and explore the story of the Nutcracker, if everybody is into that, just to keep that holiday going. Charizard EX Full Art from 151. Whoo! They are from White Flame Venusaurus. They are from Mega. Oh, yeah. How could you forget? Hey, Purple Moon. How's it going? Christina Slankard. It's good to see you. Hope you and Una are doing well. Right. Let's do this. So, yeah, definitely interesting. And I certainly love to see because I'm definitely a child of culture. I watched many, many cartoons as I was growing up. And my father used to tell me that there's only really 7 stories on the planet, and we're just really good at telling them in different ways. And so it always fascinated me to kind of understand and know where the stories and renditions and adaptations came from. So this is the original Steadfast Tin Soldier and Nutcracker. So I'm really looking forward to reading those with you. Go. Oh, I guess we already have a Chaos link. Let's go. Which reminds me, Rafa, thank you for that. I was working all day, fam. I never got that spreadsheet with all our commands on it, but I am going to fix that this week. Promise. I'm going to make a spreadsheet of them all and kind of put it in a shared document so we can all view it. And it'll also be a living document. So when you add a command, you can add it to the spreadsheet. Not you, but like everybody. All right. That's 2. That is 2. Oh. And that took us right to about the 8-minute mark here. 2 more minutes and we'll get started. Got 12 of you, 11 of you in here. Appreciate y'all being here. Got 8 likes already. And just a reminder, y'all, that we are going to, we are well into our 12 days of Ghostmas, and the first 2 days are out. So please go and show some love to the channels of which they shout out. The first night is going to be Eric Rips, and there is a video that is posted in that short link description. Go ahead and make sure that you sub up and comment on theirs. And day 2 was the one and only, our very own Mr. Matt Gooch. I felt it only necessary for day 2 being the Squirtle, as well as today being the 15th. It only made sense to have Matt claim this day. So, Matt Gooch, thank you for absolutely everything that you do. And I hope this helps you get closer to your goals, man. Gotta head out. Much love and chat. Bless stream, brother. Thanks, Chaos. I super appreciate you, man. Enjoy your stream a little bit later as well. Best of luck in the ripping. 10 people watching from the homestead. Well, hello, everybody. I appreciate you watching. And I have you know that Leighton, Layla, Katrina are some of my favorite people on the planet. On the planet. Boom, says Matt. Will do, bro. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, all right, all right. Up to 12. Up to 12. Let's go. Sorry, I was putting Spree to bed. No worries at all, man. I hope he had a good Good stream. Oh, absolutely. That means the world for me. It means the world to me, for my NZ fam. What are we reading tonight? So we are going to start with Hans Christian Andersen's The Brave Tin Soldier. Excuse me, sorry. Then we're going to move into The Nutcracker. And we're going to read the original story of the Nutcracker and the trip to Toyland. Yeah, been a minute for the Steadfast Tin Soldier or the Brave Tin Soldier. And this has probably been redone again many, many times in many cartoon form adaptations. So it's going to be nice to read the original Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. By the way, you can buy the entirety of Hans Christian Andersen's completed fairy tales on Kindle for like $1.99 if you're ever curious. So not only that, but I have every single thing he's ever done, and we've got more than enough to go through on these reading streams. And we'll get into things like The Little Mermaid and The Snow Queen. We might do The Snow Queen next week. That's what the movie Frozen was based on. And now it makes sense, right? Because there's characters in the movie Frozen, and their names are Hans, Kristoff, Anna, and Sven. Hans, Kristoff, Anna, Sven. Hans Christian Andersen. Get it? Nice little head nod to the author. But without further ado, we are going to jump right into The Brave Tin Soldier. Thank you all so much for being here. Don't forget to smash the like button, y'all. Sub up if you haven't. We suddenly hit, we're at like 917, 918 subs suddenly, so I really appreciate it. Ancient Mew, it's good to see you, fam. All right, here we go. The Brave Tin Soldier. There were once 25 tin soldiers, who were all brothers, for they had been made out of the same old tin spoon. They shouldered arms and looked straight before them, and wore a splendid uniform, red and blue. The first thing in the world they ever heard were the words, "Tin soldiers!" uttered by a little boy, who clapped his hands with delight when the lid of the box, in which they lay, was taken off. They were given him for a birthday present, and he stood at the table to set them up. The soldiers were all exactly alike, except one, who had only one leg. He had been left to the last, and then there was not enough of the melted tin to finish him, so they made him to stand firmly on one leg, and this caused him to be very remarkable. The table on which the tin soldier stood was covered with other playthings, but the most attractive to the eye was a pretty little paper castle. Though the small windows and rooms could not be seen in front of the castle, a number of little trees surrounded a piece of looking glass, which was intended to represent a transparent lake. Swans, made of wax, swam on the lake and were reflected in it. All this was very pretty, but the prettiest of all was a tiny little lady who stood at the open door of the castle. She also was made of paper, and she wore a dress of clear muslin, with a narrow blue ribbon over her shoulder, just like a scarf. In front of these was affixed in glittering tinsel rose, as large as her whole face. The little lady was a dancer, and she stretched out with both her arms and raised one of her legs so high that the tin soldier could not see it at all, and he thought that she, like himself, had only one leg. "That is the wife for me," he thought, "but she is too grand and lives in a castle, while I have only live in a box. 25 of us altogether. That is no place for her. Still, I must try to make her acquaintance." Then he laid himself at full length on the table behind the snuff box that stood upon it, so that he could peep at the little delicate lady, who continued to stand on one leg without losing her balance. When evening came, the other tin soldiers were all placed in the box, and the people of the house went to bed. Then the playthings began to have their own games together, to pay visits, to have sham fights, and to give balls. The tin soldiers rattled in their box. They wanted to get out and join the amusements, but they could not open the lid. The nutcrackers played at leapfrog, and the pencil jumped about the table. There was such a noise that the canary woke up and began to talk, and in poetry too. Only the tin soldier and the dancer remained in their places. She stood on tiptoe, with her legs stretched out as firmly as he did on his one leg. He never took his eyes from her, even for a moment. The clock struck 12, and with a bounce, up sprang the lid of the snuff box. But instead of snuff, there jumped up a little black goblin, for the snuff box was a toy puzzle. "Tin soldier," said the goblin, "don't wish for what does not belong to you." But the tin soldier pretended not to hear. "Very well, wait till tomorrow then," said the goblin. Then the children came in the next morning. They placed the tin soldiers in the window. Now, whether it was the goblin who did it, or the drought, it's not known, but the window flew open, and out fell the tin soldier, heels over head, from the third story into the street beneath. It was a terrible fall, for he came head downwards, his helmet and his bayonet stuck in between the flagstones, and his one leg up in the air. The servant maid and the little boy went downstairs directly to look for him, but he was nowhere to be seen. Although once they nearly trod upon him, if he had called out, "Here I am," it would have been all right. But he was too proud to cry out for help while he wore the uniform. Presently it began to rain, and the drops fell faster and faster, till there was a heavy shower. When it was over, two boys happened to pass by, and one of them said, "Look, there's a tin soldier. He ought to have a boat to sail in." So they made a boat out of newspaper, and placed the tin soldier in it, and sent him sailing down the gutter, while the two boys ran by the side of it and clapped their hands. Good gracious, what large waves arose in that gutter, and how fast the stream rolled on, for the rain had been very heavy. The paper boat rocked up and down, and turned itself around sometimes so quickly that the tin soldier trembled, yet he remained firm. His countenance did not change. He looked straight before him, and shouldered his musket. Suddenly the boat shot under a bridge which formed a part of a drain, and then it was as dark as the tin soldier's box. "Where am I going now?" thought he. "This is as black as goblin. This is the black goblin's fault, I'm sure. Ah, well, if the little lady were only here with me in the boat, I should not care for any darkness." Suddenly there appeared a great water rat, who lived in the drain. "Have you a passport?" asked the rat. "Give it to me at once." But the tin soldier remained silent, and held his musket tighter than ever. The boat sailed on, and the rat followed it. How he did gnash his teeth and cry out to the bits of wood and straw, "Stop him! Stop him! He has not paid toll! He has not shown his pass!" But the stream rushed on stronger and stronger. The tin soldier could already see daylight shining where the arch ended. Then he heard a roaring sound, quite terrible enough to frighten the bravest man. At the end of the tunnel, the drain fell into a large canal over a steep place, which made it as dangerous for him as a waterfall would be to us. He was too close to it to stop, so the boat rushed on, and the poor tin soldier could only hold himself as stiffly as possible without moving an eyelid, to show that he was not afraid. The boat whirled round 3, 4 times, and then filled with water to the very edge. Nothing could save it from sinking. He now stood up to his neck in water, while deeper and deeper sank the boat, and the paper became soft and loose with the wet, till the last of the water closed over the tin soldier's head. He thought of the elegant little dancer whom he should never see again, and the words of the song sounded in his ears. "Farewell, warrior, ever brave, drifting onward to thy grave." Then the paper boat fell into pieces, and the soldier sank into the water, and immediately afterwards was swallowed up by a great fish. Oh, how dark it was inside the fish! A great deal darker than the tunnel, and narrower too. But the tin soldier continued firm, and lay at full length, shouldering his musket. The fish swam to and fro, making the wonderful movements. But at last he became quite still. After a while, a flash of lightning seemed to pass through him, and then the daylight approached, and a voice cried out, "I declare, here's a tin soldier!" The fish had been caught, taken to market, and sold to the cook, who took him to the kitchen and cut him open with a large knife. She picked up the soldier and held him by the waist between her finger and thumb, and carried him into the room. They were all anxious to see this wonderful soldier who had traveled about inside a fish, but he was not at all proud. They placed him on the table, and how many curious things do happen in the world! There he was in the very same room from the window of which he had fallen. There were the same children, the same playthings standing on the table, and the pretty castle with the elegant little dancer at the door. She still balanced herself on one leg and held up the other, so she was as firm as himself. It touched the tin soldier so much to see her that he almost wept tin tears. But he kept them back. He only looked at her, and they both remained silent. Presently, one of the little boys took up the tin soldier and threw him into the stove. He had no reason for doing so, therefore it must have been the fault of the black goblin who lived in the snuffer box. The flames lighted up the tin soldier as he stood. The heat was very terrible. But whether it proceeded from the real fire or from the fire of love, he could not tell. Then he could see that the bright colors were faded from his uniform. But whether they had been washed off during his journey or from the effects of his sorrow, no one could say. He looked at the little lady, and she looked at him. He felt himself melting away, but he still remained firm with his gun on his shoulder. Suddenly the door of the room flew open, and the draught of air caught up the little dancer. She fluttered like a sylph right into the stove by the side of the tin soldier, and was instantly in flames, and was gone. The tin soldier melted down into a lump, and the next morning, when the maidservant took the ashes out of the stove, she found him in the shape of a little tin heart. But of the little dancer nothing remained, but the tinsel rose, which was burnt black as cinder. Well, that was a sad ending to a beautiful story. Hey, Lori, what's going on? JB's, how's it going? Kara, it's good to see you, Kara. Missed your reading. I missed you, man. I missed reading too, indeed. Celebrating the 2 months. I appreciate you, fam. Well, that was a nice little story, but at the same time, it was like, they were rejoiced and then gone just like that. Stafford, how's it going, man? It is good to see you. Oh, scale 1 to 10, y'all. Did you like the story? It had a bunch of deep significance, but yeah, the ending was a little rushed. Hope you and the family are doing well. It was a nice little breather, nice little warm-up story before we get into the Nutcracker and the Mouse King, it's called. Solid 8.2. You're funny, boo. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you all being here. Go away. Thank you. It felt very familiar, right? Like you've seen that story a million times before. Very Romeo and Juliet, maybe. Doing good. Hope you're feeling better. Hope you're feeling better indeed. All right, y'all. Let's see. We're at about 24 minutes, so it didn't take us too long. This one might take us a little bit longer, as this is like the story. So we're gonna go and we're gonna see if we can finish this one too, so we can keep it kind of keep the stories per stream before we get back into our books. Get my comfortable position here. I'm actually gonna put my feet up right now. Lean back and just enjoy the melodies. Does anybody remember that album? There's a band called The Offspring, and The Offspring put out an album called Smash back in like 1994. Greatest album. And randomly, in the beginning, there's this guy who's talking, and he pretty well goes through. He's like, what does he say? Welcome back. Take your shoes off, kick your feet up, lean back, and just enjoy the melodies. Because after all, music soothes even the savage beast. And then the next track starts, and it's incredible. But that guy comes to my mind all the time. I was 4 years old. Oh my god. Whoops. I can remember cruising in my PokéGhost's yellow banana mobile. Yellow banana boat, he called it. It was a convertible yellow, giant yellow boat. It was great. All right, y'all. Appreciate you being here. Smash that like if you haven't already. Got 12 in and 13 likes. I really do appreciate y'all. Let's get into the Nutcracker and the Mouse King. And this is by E.T.A. Hoffman. This is the story that inspired the musical. Me too. I actually have their Conspiracy of One logo on my chest tattooed. Like if I had to pick a favorite band, it would be them. Chapter 1, Christmas Eve. All through the day of Christmas Eve, Dr. Stahlbaum's children had not been allowed into the dining room, much less into the drawing room opening out of it. In the corner of the back parlor, Fred and Mary sat cuddled up together, shuddering with excitement of mystery, for though twilight had come on, nobody brought in any lights this evening. Fred whisperingly told his 7-year-old sister how, since early in the morning, he had listened to the stir and the bustle of the soft hammerings in these forbidden chambers. Also, how, not long ago, a small dark man, with a great box under his arm, had come slipping over the floor. But he knew well that this was nobody else than Godfather Drosselmeyer. Then Mary clapped her little hands for joy, crying, "Ah, what fine things will Godfather Drosselmeyer have made for us!" Councillor Drosselmeyer, so people called him, was far more a handsome man, short and thin, with many wrinkles on his face and a great black patch where his right eye should have been. Also, he had no hair on his head, so he wore a very fine white wig, which seemed to be all made of glass. So clever a piece of work was it. The godfather himself, indeed, was a very clever workman who actually knew all about clocks, and could even make them with his own hands. When any of the fine clocks in the Stahlbaum's house went out of order and did not strike, Godfather Drosselmeyer would come, take off his glass wig and his drab coat, tie on a blue apron, and stick sharp things into the clock's inside, so that little Mary felt quite sorry for it. But this did the clock no harm, which, on the contrary, got to life again, and at once began to tick, strike, and chime, to the delight of all the family. He never came without bringing something pretty in his pockets for the children. Now a puppet that could move its eyes and make bows, most comic to behold. Now a box out of which he would hop a little bird or something else of the kind. But for Christmas he always prepared some grand elaborate piece of work that cost him much trouble, on which account, when given to the children, it was carefully taken charge of by their parents. Ah, what fine things will Godfather Drosselmeyer made for us? Mary wondered, but Fred was of opinion it could this time be no other than a castle, in which all kinds of beautiful soldiers marched up and down and were drilled, and other soldiers were to come, who should try to get into the castle, but then the soldiers inside would fire off cannon, and there would be such a grand booming and banging. No, no, Mary cut him short. Godfather Drosselmeyer has told me of a beautiful garden with a great pond in it, on which splendid swans with gold bands round their necks are to swim about and sing such pretty songs. Then a little girl will run up from the garden and call the swans to her and feed them with gingerbread. Swans don't eat gingerbread, broke in Fred rather rudely. And Godfather Drosselmeyer could not make a whole garden either. Anyhow, we get few of the toys he makes. They are always taken away from us. So I like much better the things Papa and Mama give us, which we have for our very own and can do with what we like. Then the children went on guessing and guessing what it would be this time. Mary remarked how Missy Gertrude, her big doll, was much changed for the worst, since she kept tumbling on the floor more awkwardly than ever, which never happened without leaving dirty marks on her face. And as for keeping her clothes clean, that was out of the question. All the scoldings in the world thrown away on her. Fred, for his part, dwelt on the fact that a fine wooden horse was much wanted in his stable. Also, how his toy soldiers were greatly deficient in cavalry, as his papa must be aware. These children knew well that their parents had bought for them all sorts of fine presents. Yet they were persuaded that Father Christmas looked on them with friendly eyes, and bestowed from his bounteous hand the gifts that came more welcome now than any other time. As they kept on whispering over the expected presents, their older sister Louisa came to remind them that it is Father Christmas who, through the hands of their dear parents, always supplies what will afford them real joy and pleasure, as he knows better how to do than children themselves, who should therefore not be wishing and hoping for all sorts of things, but quietly and dutifully await what is to be given to them. Little Mary became thoughtfully silent, but Fred murmured to himself, "I should like a horse and some hawsers, though." It had grown quite dark. Fred and Mary, sitting closely side by side, did not dare to speak a word. They fancied they could hear a fluttering of soft wings about them, and a strain of beautiful music in the distance. A bright light gleamed upon the wall, and they knew that Father Christmas was flying away on shining clouds to other happy children. All at once a silvery bell went cling, cling. The doors flew open, and such a brilliance streamed out of the great room that the children stood as if enchanted on the threshold, with loud exclamations of wonder. But Papa and Mamma came forward and took Fred and Mary by the hand, saying, come along, dear children, and see what Father Christmas has given you." It's going to take me a little time to adjust to the old-timey talk, so I apologize for that. So far, so good. We've all been there, right? Little kids on Christmas. Walking into that room, everything looks different. The presents weren't there like 4 hours ago. And we got to read in our last book how he does it. Chapter 2, The Presents. I put it to yourself, my friendly reader or listener, Fred, Fanny, Eddie, or whatever be your name, and I beg you to bring clearly before your eyes your own last Christmas tree or table adorned with pretty gay presents. Then you can very well understand how these children stopped, dumbfounded, with sparkling eyes. How only after little Mary cried with a deep sigh of delight, "Oh, how beautiful! How beautiful!" and how Fred jumped for joy to relieve his feelings. All the past year, indeed, they must have been particularly good and well behaved, for never had they seen such a number of delightful presents at this time. The great fir tree in the middle bore ever so many gold and silver apples, and for buds and blossoms every branch hung thick with almonds and brightly colored sugar plums and other best kinds of goodies. But the finest thing about the marvelous tree must not be forgotten, that 100 small lights twinkled like stars among its foliage, so that, illuminated as it was inside and out, it seemed to invite the children to pluck its fruits and flowers. And round about the tree everything shone gay and splendid, all the fine presents there. Who could ever describe them? Mary caught sight of the most elegant dolls, all sorts of neat little dolls, furniture, and what seemed finest of all, a silk frock prettily decked out with colored ribbons, stood spread out on the dress stand before her eyes, so that she could admire it from every side, as she did, crying out again and again, "Oh, the pretty! Oh, the dear dress! And may I really put it on?" Meanwhile, Fred, galloping and trotting round 3 or 4 times, tried out his new horse, which he indeed found brindled and saddled on the table. Dismounting, he reported that it was a wild creature, but no matter, he would soon break it in, and proceeded to muster his new squadron of Hausers, who were generously equipped in red and gold, with silver swords, and rode such shiny white horses, these also might almost be believed of pure silver. The children had got over their excitement a little, and were able to take a look at the picture books which lay open on the display, pretty flowers and brightly colored figures of people, even of dear little children at play, painted as naturally as if they really lived and spoke. Yes, Fred and Mary were settling down upon these wonderful picture books when cling, 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 ling, the bell rang again. They knew that now it was Godfather Dossemir's turn, and ran to the table standing by the wall. The screen that had so long concealed it was quickly drawn away, and what did the young folks see? On a green lawn, bespangled with gay flowers, stood a most noble castle, all plate-glass windows of gilded towers. A chime of bells was heard, doors and windows flew open, and you saw how very tiny but most elegant ladies and gentlemen with feathers in their hats and trailing skirts moved inside the rooms. In the central hall, it seemed to be on fire, so many lights burned. There was there in silver chandeliers. Children wearing short coats and vests were dancing to the music of the chimes. A gentleman in an emerald green cloak kept looking out through the window, nodding and disappearing by turns, while a figure just like Godfather Dossemeyer himself, but scarcely highly than Papa's thumb, would from time to time come and stand at the castle door and then go in again. With his arms leaning on the table, Fred had examined the dancing and walking figures, and now he said, "Godfather Drosselmeyer, will you let me go into your castle?" The counselor replied to him that this would never do. Indeed, he spoke truthfully, for it was foolish of Fred to want to go into a castle which, gilded towers and all, was not so high as himself. Fred had to admit that. After a time, as the ladies and gentlemen went on walking up and down in the same way, the children dancing, the green man now looking out the window, Godfather Drosselmeyer's likeness coming to the door, and cried impatiently, "Godfather Drosselmeyer, now will you come out for once at the other door?" "That won't do, dear Fred," answered the counselor. "Well," said Fred again, "just make the green man who looks out so often walk about with the others." "That won't do either," repeated the counselor. "Couldn't the children come down the stairs?" persisted Fred. "I should like to see them nearer." "Oh, all that won't do," said the counselor, not in very good humor. "The machinery has to work as it is made." "Is that the way of it?" exclaimed Fred in a tone of contempt. "Nothing will do. I'll tell you what, Godfather Drosselmeyer, if your fine little figures in the castle can only go on doing the same things, they are not worth much, and I don't particularly care about them. No, I would rather have my Hausers. They can maneuver forwards, backwards as I like, and they are not shut up in a house." And with this he ran to the table, and made his squadron on their silver horses trot up and down, and wheel and charge and shoot to his heart's content. Mary also had quietly slipped away, for she too soon grew tired of the struggling and capering of the puppets in the castle, but was so polite and good-natured that she would not show it so plainly as her brother Fred. Councillor Drosselmeyer spoke rather crossly to the parents. "Such a skilful contrivance is not for senseless children. I will pack up my castle again." But the mother came forward and got him to show her the construction and the wonderfully ingenious works by which the little puppets were set in motion. The councillor took it all to pieces and put it together again. This put him into a rather better temper, and he presented the children furthermore with some pretty brown men and women made from gingerbread, with gilded faces, hands, and legs, which quite delighted them. Sister Louisa had, by her mother's wish, put on the handsome dress which was her present, and looked very nice in it. But when Mary was to try on her new frock, she thought she would rather look at it a little longer, and they allowed her to have her own way. Presents, 14 likes, appreciate y'all. Just at about 40 minutes now. Okay, kids enjoying the toys. See where this is going. Can you imagine getting that giant house as like a giant toy construction and moving puppetry? Sounds incredible. Snot-nosed little kid. I don't like Fred too much. Chapter 3. The Favorite. Mary, in fact, could not tear herself away from the table of presents, since she had just discovered on it something, till now unseen. The marching off of Fred's Hausers, previously paraded close in front of the Christmas tree, left exposed to view a very remarkable little man, who stood still in the background, as if quietly awaiting his turn for notice. His figure, indeed, was not much to be proud of, for besides that his rather long, thick body by no means fitted his small, thin legs, his head also seemed far too big. His nice clothes, however, which bespoke of persons of taste and cultivation, went far to make up for his deformity. He wore a very fine, shiny violet hauser jacket, with many white buttons and braidings, pantaloons of the same stuff, and the most elegant boots that ever adorn the feet of a dainty undergraduate. Aye, or of an officer. They fitted his neat little legs as closely as if painted on them. Ridiculous it was indeed that with this costume he had hanging behind him a short, clumsy cloak or hood which looked exactly like wood, and a queer woodsman's cap on his head. But Mary bethought herself that Godfather Drosselmeyer also sometimes wore a very ugly lounging jacket and a dreadful cap, yet was a dear, good godfather for all that. Also, she considered that their godfather would not be nearly so good-looking as the small figure, even if, in other respects, he were dressed out as smartly. As Mary kept looking harder and harder at this mannikin, who had quite taken her heart at first sight, she came to perceive what a kindly nature was expressed on his countenance. His clear, green, and certainly too prominent eyes bespoke nothing but friendliness and benevolence. It suited his looks well that his chin bore a well-trimmed beard of white cotton, which set off the pleasant smile on his bright red mouth. "Ah, papa!" cried Mary at length, "who is to have this dearest little man on the Christmas tree?" "That," said her father, "that fellow, my dear child, is to make himself useful to you all. His work is to crack hard nuts for you, and he belongs to Louisa as much as to Fred and to you." With this, her father carefully took the figure off the table, and lifting it up its wooden cloak, made the mannikin's mouth gape open to show 2 rows of very sharp white teeth. Then he told Mary to put in a nut, and crack! The man had crushed it, so that the shell fell to pieces, and Mary got the small kernel in her hand. Now Mary and all might know that the elegant little man belonged to the race of nutcrackers. Practiced the profession of his ancestors. The little girl cried out for joy when her father said, "Since friend Nutcracker pleases you so much, dear Mary, he shall be your special charge and pet, though, as I said, Louisa and Fred have much a right to use him as you do." Mary at once took him into her arms and made him crack nuts, yet picking out the smallest ones, in order that the mannikin might not have to stretch his mouth so wide open, which was not good for him. Louisa came to look, and for her also friend Nutcracker had to perform his service, which he seemed to do with good will, for he kept on smiling in the most admirable way. Meanwhile, Fred had grown tired of all his riding and drilling, so when he heard such a pleasant cracking of nuts, he ran to his sisters and laughed heartily at the funny little man, who, as Fred also liked to eat nuts, passed from hand to hand, and was never allowed to stop opening and shutting his mouth. Fred always kept shoving in the biggest and hardest nuts, but all of a sudden there was a crack, crick, then 3 teeth fell out of the Nutcracker's mouth, and his underjaw went loose and wobbly. "Oh, my poor dear Nutcracker!" cried Mary, snatching him out of Fred's hands. "What a silly, stupid fellow!" exclaimed Fred. "Sets up for being a Nutcracker and hasn't a good set of grinders. He doesn't seem to be very first-rate at his business. Hand him over, Mary. He shall go on cracking nuts for me, even though he loses all his teeth and his whole chin into the bargain, which is what such a good-for-nothing deserves." "No, no," cried Mary in tears. "You are not to have him, my dear Nutcracker. Just see how sadly he looks at me and shows his sore little mouth. But you are a cruel boy. You beat your horse and have your shoulder shot." "That's what should be. You don't understand these things," answered Fred. "But the Nutcracker belongs to me as much as you. Hand him over here." Mary began to cry bitterly and made haste to wrap up the wounded Nutcracker in her small pocket handkerchief. Her presence and Godfather Drosselmeyer interfered. The latter, her parents, sorry, the latter, to Mary's grief, took Fred's part, but her father said, "I have put Nutcracker under Mary's protection, and since, as I see it, he now needs it, she has full power over him, and nobody is to say a word against her. Besides, I am very much surprised at Fred that he should require fresh duty of men injured on service. As a good soldier, he ought to know that a wounded man never put back in the ranks." Fred was much ashamed of himself, and without troubling further about nuts or Nutcracker, slipped off to the other side of the table, where his hawsers had been posted for the night, after putting out all the proper pickets. Mary picked up Nutcracker's lost teeth. Around his hurt chin she bound a nice white ribbon, taken off her dress, and then wrapped the poor little fellow, who looked very wan and dejected, more carefully than ever in her pocket handkerchief. Thus she held him, rocking him like a baby in her arms, while she turned over the pretty picture books which lay among the rest of the presents. She became quite cross, as was not at all usual with her, when Godfather Drosselmeyer laughed a great deal and kept asking how she could go on with such that hideous little creature. The strange resemblance to Drosselmeyer, which had struck her at first setting eyes on the mannequin, came again to her mind, and she spoke quite seriously. "Who knows, Godfather, whether you, if you were to make yourself as fine as my dear Nutcracker, and had as nice shiny boots on, who knows whether you would look as pretty as he does?" Mary did not understand why her parents laughed so loud, or why the counselor got so red in the face and did not join in the laugh as heartily as before. There may have been some particular reason for this. All right. Making another video, no worries at all. And we are at chapter 4, just at about 45 minutes in. I am going to freshen up my coffee real quick, and I will be right back. Hope you're all enjoying the story thus far. Let me know. And has anybody ever seen the Nutcracker Ballet? And I'll stand again and say I don't really care for Fred. Going with the caramel macchiato today. It only seemed befitting. It's a good story. I've never seen the Nutcracker. Appreciate you, Mama Ghost. I still got 13 readers in here listening. Appreciate you all. As we jump into chapter 4, Marvels. 15 likes. Y'all are great. Mama. Chapter 4, Marvels. In the parlor at Dr. Stahlbaum's, On the left-hand side, as you go in at the door, stood a high glass cupboard, where the children kept all those fine things that were given to them every Christmas. Louisa was quite a little girl when their father had the cupboard made by a very clever carpenter, who put in such clear panes of glass and arranged the whole so well that the treasures inside looked almost brighter and prettier than when you have them in your hands. On the highest shelf, out of Fred and Mary's reach, stood Godfather Drosselmeyer's works of art. Right beneath was the shelf for the picture books. The lowest compartments Mary and Fred could fill with what they pleased, but it was always the way that Mary took the bottom shelf as the dwelling of her dolls, and Fred's troops had the one over it for their cantonments? Cantonments? Why do I feel silly? Such was now the arrangement. While Fred quartered his houses above, Mary laid Missy Gertrude by her corner below, and set out a new, finely dressed doll in that well-furnished apartment, and invited herself to take goodies with her. Very well furnished was the apartment, I have said, and it is true, for I know not if you, my attentive reader, Mary, like the little Stahlbaum girl, her name, you know, was also Mary. I mean, whether you possess such a fine flower chintz sofa, several dear little chairs, a small tea table, and above all, a very neat, clean little bed for your dolls to take their repose in. All this was in one corner of the cupboard shelf, whose walls were even papered with pretty pictures. And you could easily believe that the new doll, who, as Mary learned the same evening, was also named Missy Clara, found herself very comfortable in this apartment. It was late in the evening, getting on for midnight indeed, and Godfather Drosselmeyer's had long gone home. And yet the children could not tear themselves away from the glass cupboard, for all their mothers telling them it was time to go to bed. "To tell the truth," cried Fred at length, "my Hausers would like some rest now, and so long as I'm looking at them, I know that not one of them dare nod." With this he went off, but Mary earnestly begged, "Only a little while, dear mother. Let me stay here only a little longer. I have so much still to look after. As soon as I have finished, I will go straight to bed." Mary was a very dutiful, sensible child, so her good mother could, without anxiety, leave her alone among the toys. But in case of her being so much enchanted by the new doll that other playthings as to forget the candles burning by the cupboard, her mother put them all out. Then only a lamp, which hung from the ceiling in the center of the room, spread a soft, pleasant light around. "Come soon to bed, dear Mary, or you will not be up at a good time in the morning," called out the mother as she went off to her own bedroom. When Mary found herself alone, she quickly set about what she had in mind to do, at which she hardly knew herself why. She did not care to be seen by her mother. All this time she had been nursing the injured Nutcracker in her arms, wrapped in a handkerchief. Now she laid him carefully upon the table, softly, softly unwrapped him, and examined his hurts. Nutcracker was very pale, but yet he smiled, with such an air of melancholy kindness that it went right to Mary's heart. "Ah, dear little Nutcracker," she murmured, "don't be angry with my brother Fred for hurting you so much. He did not mean any great harm. He is only rather unfeeling, though that through that rough soldier life. But in other ways, a real kind-hearted boy, I can assure you. But now I will take very good care of you till you have grown quite well and happy again. Your teeth shall be put in firm and your shoulders set straight by Godfather Drosselmeyer, who understands these things." So Mary was going to say, but could not finish the sentence, for, as she mentioned the name of Drosselmeyer, friend Nutcracker made an ugly cross face, and his eyes seemed to shoot out green sparkles. Then, just as Mary was ready to feel terrified out of her wits, there again she saw the worthy Nutcracker's face, as placid as ever, with this melancholy smile. And now she knew that a draught in the room, making the lamp flicker, must have transmogrified his countenance for a moment. "I am not a foolish girl to be so easily frightened. I actually believe this wooden figure was making faces at me." But I am really getting so fond of Nutcracker. He is such a funny and such a good-natured fellow, and so he must be properly nursed as best deserves." With this, she took Nutcracker on her arm, approached the glass cupboard, bent down before it, and thus addressed the new doll. "I beg you very particularly, Missy Clara, to give up your bed to the sick, wounded Nutcracker, and manage as well as you can on the sofa. Remember that you are quite well and strong, or you would not have such a plump red cheeks, and that very few of the handsomest dolls possess so soft sofas as you have." Missy Clara, in all her Christmas finery, looked very stuck up and sulky, and did not answer a word. "Why should I make so much work about it?" exclaimed Mary, drawing forward the bed, where she laid Nutcracker very gently and softly, bound up in his injured shoulder with a pretty little ribbon from her own dress, and covered him snugly with the bedclothes up to his nose. "He is not to stay beside that naughty Clara," she said, and lifted the bed, Nutcracker and all, on the shelf above, so that he lay close to the pretty village of toy houses in which Fred's Hauser's were quartered. She shut up the cupboard and was going off to her bedroom when, "Now listen, children," there began a soft, soft whisper and stirring and rustling all around her. Behind the stove, behind the chairs, behind the cupboard, the clock ticked louder and louder, and gave a whir as if it were going to strike, but it did not. Mary looked at it, and great gilded owl which sat atop had let down his wings as to cover the whole clock face, at the same time stretching out his ugly cat-like face and his hooked beak, and more loudly came the ticks as plain as words, clock, clock, click, low, softly, tick, mouse king's ears are quick, purr, purr, ting, tong, sing out the old song, but strike in a low tune, it will be over soon. The purr whir went the clock 12 times, but dully and hoarsely, as if its notes were muffled. Mary began to creep all over, and in her fright she was on the point of running away, when she saw how Godfather Drosselmeier seemed to have taken the place of the owl, his drab coat skirts hanging down on both sides like wings. Yet she made an effort to be brave and called out, almost crying, "Godfather Drosselmeier! Godfather Drosselmeier! Whatever are you doing up there? Come down, and don't frighten me so terribly, you naughty Godfather Drosselmeier." But now there broke out from all sides the wild creaking and squeaking, and soon behind the walls there was a trotting and galloping as if 1,000 tiny feet and 1,000 little lights shone through the chinks in the floor. They were not tapers, no, but small sparkling eyes, and Mary perceived that the host of mice were everywhere peeping forth and working themselves out. Presently they were going trot, trot, hop, hop round the room. Troops of mice, always growing more numerous, and sprinted, galloped down and up, and at length formed themselves in ranks, as Fred was accustomed to draw up his troops when he gave orders for a battle. This struck Mary as very comical, and not having any natural horror of mice like many other children, her dread would have passed off, when all at once there came a squeak so piercing and startling that an ice-cold shudder ran down her back. Oh, what did she see now? Yes, indeed, my worthy reader, Fred, or whatever your name be. I know that your heart is as much in the right place as that of the clever and brave Field Marshal Fred Stahlbaum. But, all the same, had you only seen what came before Mary's eyes, you would have run away on the spot. I believe you would even have jumped quickly into your bed and drawn the clothes farther over your ears than there was any need for. Ah, that is just what Mary could not do for. Would you believe it? Right under her feet burst up sand and lime and crumbled stone, as if thrown out by some subterranean power. And from the floor rose 7 mouse heads, with 7 glittering crowns, hissing and squeaking terribly. Before long the body also squeezed itself clear, on the neck of which grew these 7 heads, and a huge 7-crowned mouse shrieked with all its throats, 3 times piping out a greeting to his army, that at once set itself in motion, and charged trot, trot, pit, pit, dot, dot, straight upon the cupboard, straight upon Mary, who still stood by its glass front. The girl's heart had been beating so violently for distress and terror that she believed that she would soon burst out of her bosom, and then she would die. But now all the blood seemed to freeze in her veins. Half fainting, she staggered back. Something went crash, crash, and then the pane of the cupboard which she had struck with her elbow was shivered to pieces. At the same moment she felt a smarting pain in her right arm, but at once a weight seemed to be taken off her heart, for she heard no more squeaking and shrieking. All had become still, and through the dust not look, she thought the mice, scared by the crash of the glass, must have scurried back into their holes. But what happened next? Right behind Mary there arose a strange stir and bustled in the cupboard, and tiny voices began to be heard. "Awake, awake! Arms to take! This is the night! Rouse for the fight!" And then plead out a pleasant, pretty chime of bells. "That is my little bell toy!" cried Mary joyfully, springing quickly up to look. Now she saw how the cupboard was lighted up in some wonderful fashion, and how all its inhabitants were on foot. There were several figures there, besides the dolls, running about in confusion and striking with their little arms. All of a sudden Nutcracker jumped up, threw its blankets far away, and sprang to his feet on the bed, shouting loudly his war cry of defiance. "Nick, knack, knack! Stupid mousy pack! Crick, crack, whack! Hew, hick, and hack!" And with this he drew his little sword and waved it in the air and cried, "You, my dear vassals, friends, and brothers, will you stand by me in the hard battle?" At once spirited reply 3 clowns, a pantaloon, 4 chimney sweepers, 2 fiddlers, and a drummer. "Yes, Lord, we hold to you with steadfast loyalty. With you we march to combat, to victory or death." And they pressed after the martial Nutcracker, who ventured a dangerous spring from the upper shelf. They, for their part, could well manage the jump, for not only were they thickly clothed in cloth and silk, but there was nothing inside of them but cotton and bran. So down they plumped as softly as bags of wool. But the poor Nutcracker, he would surely have broken arms and legs, for remember, it was nearly 2 feet high from the shelf in which he stood to the one below, and his body was as brittle as if cut out of matchwood. Yes, Nutcracker would surely have broken his limbs, had not, at the moment he leaped down, Missy Clara sprang from the sofa, and in her soft arms received the hero with his drawn sword. "Ah, dear, kind Clara, how have I mistaken you?" sobbed out Mary. "I am sure you must have given up your bed to friend Nutcracker with a good will after all." And now Missy Clara said, pressing the young hero gently to her silken breast, "Oh, sir, will you, sick and wounded as you are, yet expose yourself to combat and peril? See how eager for the fray you are, your bold vassals, and how they troop themselves as certain of victory. Clowns, pantaloon, chimney sweepers, fiddlers, and a drummer are already down below on the field, and the motto figures in my compartment are all astir, preparing for the fight. Will you not, dear sir, rest in my arms, or behold the battle from the top of my high feather hat?" Thus spoke Clara, but Nutcracker behaved quite roughly, kicking so hard with his legs that the doll had soon to let him go and set him on the ground. Immediately then he knelt gallantly on one knee, murmuring out, "Fair lady, ever in a thick of combat will I remember the grace and favor thou hast shown me." At this Clara bent down so low that she could seize him by both arms, lifted him softly up, made haste to loosen her richly spangled girdle, and would have thrown it over his shoulder if he had not taken 2 steps backwards, laying his hand upon his breast and speaking with a formal politeness. "Do not deign, O lady, to waste your favor on me." Here he stopped short, sighed deeply, tore from his shoulder the ribbon of which Mary had bandaged him, pressed it to his lips, hung it round him as his consignance, then, brandishing his glittered unsheathed sword, sprang light and active as a bird over the edge of the cupboard onto the doom. You remark, kind and honored reader, that Nutcracker, even before he really became alive, must have deeply felt the affection goodness of which Mary had treated him. and on this account, only because Mary was so kind, he would not take or wear a token from Missy Clara, splendid and beautiful as it was. The true-hearted Nutcracker chose rather to adorn himself with Mary's simple ribbon. But what now is going to happen? As soon as Nutcracker sprang down, the squeaking and pattering broke out again. Under the big table swarm the deathly squadrons of countless mice, and over all towers the frightful seven-headed Mouse King. How will the battle go? Hey, what's going on, Kev? Hey, Sean Bowden, how you doing? Almost 20 likes. Mystic Star, how's it going? It's good to see you. Kev, saw that vid of you and John. Of me and John? Oh, that Kev, sorry. Doesn't happen often, but I confuse we Kevs too. Well, that's an interesting story. We get another battle. A toy battle. I just want to watch Kevin go to bed. Yeah, that would be best. I hope it fixes itself soon. What's up, Mrs. 5150? I hope you're doing well. Contaminants, a polluting or poisonous substance. Contaminants. Thank you for that. It was not contaminants. But I appreciate that, Nick. It's good to see you, fam. I do fall for that each time. I do. I got to get used to the ghost. A majority of people have now started calling me Ghost, and I just need to be ready for it. That is true. JP, we reminded him he owes you several Chaos Beans for not streaming. Chapter 5, The Battle. All right. Let's get into it. Mice and toys. This is what I live for. Chapter 5, The Battle. Beat the general march, my trusty drummer, cried Nutcracker at the top of his voice. And at once the drummer began to rub-a-dub in the skillfulest ways, so that the panes of the cupboard shook and echoed. Now came a crashing and clattering within, and Mary perceived that the lids of various boxes in which Fred's army had been quartered were violently raised up, and out sprang the infantry, and down onto the lower shelf, where they fell into shining ranks. Nutcracker flew up and down, haranguing the troops in animating words. Let no dog of let no dog of a trumpeter blow or stir, he exclaimed angrily, and straightway turned to the pantaloon, who had grown somewhat pale, with a telltale chattering of his long chin, and addressed him in solemn tones. General, I know your courage and your experience. Here quickness of eye and decision are all important. To you I entrust the command-in-chief of the cavalry and the artillery. You don't need a horse, and you have such long legs and can gallop along them on well enough. Now attend to your duty. Forthwith Pantaloon passed his long dry fingers upon his mouth and gave such a piercing crow that it rang like the notes of 100 shrill bugles. Thereupon rose in the cupboard a neighing and a trampling, and lo, Fred's crusaders and dragoons. But before all, the new gaily equipped hawsers moved out, soon coming to a halt on the floor below. Now, with flying flags and clanging music, regiment after regiment defiled before the Nutcracker, and drew themselves up in 3 lines, obliquely across the room. But in front of Fred's cannon advanced rattling with their gunners about each, and presently they began to go boom, boom, and Mary saw how their sugar-plum shot plunged into the masses of the mouse army, who became powdered all over and put greatly to shame. But particularly they suffered severe loss from a battery of heavy guns, which had taken up its position at Mamma's footstool, and boom, pow, boom, kept volleying the gingerbread nuts among the mice, which did much execution. The mice, however, steadily advanced, and even came the length of taking a few of the guns, but still resounded to martial din, brr boom, purr boom, brr. Till for smoke and dust, Mary could scarcely see what was going on, yet this much was certain, that each army fought with the utmost determination, and that victory wavered from one side to the other. The mice kept on drawing out fresh forces, while their fire, very well delivered, took effect even as far as the glass cupboard. Clara and Gertrude ran up and down in despair and wrung their hands till they were sore. "Am I to die in my blooming youth, I, the fairest of dolls?" screamed Clara. "Have I for this so carefully preserved my looks to perish here within the walls of my home?" cried Gertrude. Then they fell upon one another's neck and lamented so loudly as to be heard all over the wild tumult of the battle. For, worthy reader, you can scarcely have any idea of the scene that now raged. Purr, purr, puff, puff, purr, scattle-dang, scattle-dong, boom, broom, broom. That's what it says. A confusion of pealing, thundering, and roaring amid the squeaked and squealed the mice and their sovereign, and then again rose Nutcracker's commanding voice as he issued the necessary orders and could be seen hurrying up to his battalions in the thick of the fire. General Pantaloon had made some most dashing cavalry charges and covered himself with glory, but Fred's Hausers were driven back by the mouse artillery, which left deadly marks on the red jackets, and this checked their ardor. Pantaloon drew them off by the left, and in his excitement he himself, with his crusaders and dragoons, executed the same movement. That is to say, they all retired by the left and went home. Thus the battery, posted on the footstool, became endangered, and before long the heavy column of fierce ugly mice charged it so resolutely that footstool, guns, and gunners were all lost. Nutcracker seemed confounded by dismay and ordered to the right wing to make the retrograde movement. You understand, my reader Fred, experienced in war as you are, that to make such a movement means much of the same thing as running away. And along with me you already lament the disaster about to come on the army of Mary's beloved Nutcracker, yet turn away your eyes from this sad spectacle, and regard the left wing of the Nutcrackerish army, where all still goes well, giving the soldiers and their commander good cause for hope. During the hottest of the fight, masses of mouse cavalry had been quietly dispatching from under the chest of drawers, and with loud horrid squeaks had furiously hurled themselves upon the Nutcracker's left wing. But what resistance they met, slowly, owing to the nature of the ground and being difficult to pass the cupboard ledge, had the regiment of motto figures advanced under the leadership of 2 Chinese emperors. They formed themselves in a hollow square. These spirited, gaily equipped, and noble troops, consisting of many gardeners, Highlanders, Japanese barbers, harlequins, cupid, lion, tigers, baboons, and apes, fought coolly, courageously, and steadily. By their Spartan bravery would this choice regiment have wrested the victory from the foe, had not a daring captain of the hostile cavalry, rushing recklessly forward, bitten off the head of one of the Chinese emperors, and then the latter, in his fall, knocked over 2 Japanese and the baboon. This made a gap through which the enemy broke into the square, and soon the whole regiment was bitten to pieces. Yet the conquerors gained little advantage by this butchery. As soon as any of their bloodthirsty troopers had bitten a bold adversary in 2, he found a small slip of printed paper in his throat, from which he died immediately. This did not much avail Nutcracker's army, which, retreat once began, became more and more completely routed, and lost men faster and faster, till the unfortunate Nutcracker, with a very small band of his comrades, was brought to bay close in front of the glass cupboard. "Bring up the reserves! Pantaloon, Clown, Drummer, where are you?" So shouted Nutcracker, who yet hoped to see fresh troops pouring out of the cupboard. There did come out indeed a few brown men and women made of gingerbread, with gilded faces, hats, and helmets, and they laid so clumsily about them that they struck none of the enemy, but instead knocked off the cap of their commander, Nutcracker himself. The light troops opposed to them soon bit through their legs, so that they tumbled down higgledy-piggledy, bringing some of their own comrades with them. Closely surrounded by foes, Nutcracker was now at the utmost danger and distress. He would have sprung back into the cupboard, but his legs were too short. Clara and Gertrude lay in a swoon. They could not help him. Hausers and dragoons galloped over him as he cried in despair. "A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" At that moment, two of the enemy skirmishers seized him by his wooden cloak, and up rushed the Mouse King, squeaking out triumph from all his 7 throats. "Oh, my poor Nutcracker!" sobbed out Mary, unable longer to restrain herself. Hardly knowing what she did, she snatched off her left shoe and violently flung it at the Mouse King, right into the middle of his troops. That moment, all appeared to grow dim and to vanish away, but Mary felt in her right arm a still sharper pain than before, and fell fainting on the floor. Cookies will be there Monday. Let's go. GG's Kev. Watching and chilling to Uncle Kev's story time. Let's go. All 8 has 8 of her grandchildren. Let's go. That's incredible. I appreciate you, Nana Katrina, for trusting your grandkids with story time. I will say that I absolutely look forward to this primarily because of my audience and who I know will be here. So I really appreciate you all. Almost 20 likes, got 18 likes, 12 people here. Much love and appreciation, y'all. I really want this Nutcracker to win. So let's see how this. I don't know if it'll wrap up. This is turning into quite the read. But we'll still keep going for another 45 and we'll see where we're at. But I really, really appreciate y'all, and I hope that you're enjoying the story. Chapter 6 Laid Up. When Mary awoke out of her deep, death-like sleep, she was lying in her own bed, and the sun appeared shining clear and bright into the room through the windows covered with frost. By her side sat a strange gentleman, whom, however, she presently recognized as a surgeon. "She is awake now," said he softly, and up came her mother, regarding her with an anxious looks of inquiry. "Oh, dear mother," murmured little Mary, "are all the mice gone, and is the good Nutcracker safe?" "Don't talk such silly stuff, Mary," answered her mother. "What have the mice to do with the Nutcracker? But you, naughty child, you have given us all a great deal of trouble and anxiety. That comes of children having their own way and not obeying their parents. Last night you were playing with your toys very late. You grew sleepy, and it may be you were frightened by a mouse jumping out, though there used to be no mice here. Anyhow, you struck your arm against the glass of the cupboard and cut yourself so badly that this gentleman, who has just taken out the bits of glass sticking in your arm, says you might have got a serious injury, or even bled to death, if the glass had cut a vein. Thank God that I woke up in the middle of the night. Then, when I found you not in bed, got up, went into the parlor. There you lie, senseless beside the cupboard, and were bleeding fast. And I had almost fainted away myself for fright to see you lying among a number of Fred's lead soldiers and other toys, broken motto figures and gingerbread men, but the Nutcracker lay on your cut arm, and your left shoe was not far off." "Ah, dear mother, mother!" broke in Mary. "These were the remains of the great fight between toys and mice, and what alarmed me so much was only the mice trying to take Nutcracker prisoner, who commanded the toy army. Then I threw my shoe among the mice, and after that I don't know what happened." The surgeon looked meaningly at her mother, who said very gently to Mary, "Never mind, my dear child. Keep yourself easy. The mice are all gone. The Nutcracker is safe and sound in the cupboard." Here Dr. Stahlbaum came into the room and had a long conversation with the surgeon. Then he felt Mary's pulse, and she could make out that they were talking about fever. She had to lie in bed and take medicine, and this lasted for several days, although, except the pain in her arm, she did not much feel she did not feel much the matter with her. She knew that Nutcracker had come safe out of the battle, and he often appeared to her as in a dream, speaking quiet, plainly, but in a very sad tone. Mary, dearest lady, I am deeply indebted to you, but there is yet more you can do for me. Mary thought a great deal over this speech, but had no idea what it might be that she could do for him. She was not able to play much with toys on account of her wounded arm, and if she tried to read or to turn over picture books, there came such a strange swimming in her eyes that she had to leave off. So time passed wearisomely, slow for her, and she had scarcely patience to wait for the twilight hour which came so welcome. For then her mother sat on the bed and a while and read or told her such pretty stories. One evening her mother had just finished the most entertaining history of Prince Charming when the door opened, and in came Godfather Drosselmeier with these words: "Now I must really see for myself how my sick and wounded Mary is getting on." As soon as Mary saw Godfather Drosselmeier in his drab coat, there returned to her a clear memory of that night when Nutcracker lost the battle against the mice, and she could not keep herself from crying out aloud to the counselor: "Oh, Godfather Drosselmeier, you are so ugly! I saw you very well sitting over the clock and covering it with your wings, to prevent it from striking loudly. Not to scare away the mice, I heard you very well calling to the Mouse King. Why did you not come to help Nutcracker and me, you ugly Godfather Drosselmeier? Isn't it all your fault, then, that I have to lie sick and wounded in bed?" "Whatever is the matter with you, dear Mary?" asked the mother, quite startled. But Godfather Drosselmeier made some very queer faces, and snarled out a sort of sing-song thus: "Pendulum, tick, tick, clock, clock, click, click, hammer goes dong ding, hour rings ting, ting. Hunt away Mouse King, owl spreads her light wing. Toys now may dance and sing, clock strikes out, ting, ding. All the works cling, cling. Pendulum goes tick, tick, clock tick, whir, purr, bim, boom, bang, burr, ding, dong, so ends my song." Mary stared at Godfather Drosselmeier with eyes open to their widest, for he looked quite different, and even much uglier than his usual self, and moved his right arm up and down like a puppet pulled by strings. He would have really terrified her if her mother had not been there, and if presently Fred, having slipped in meanwhile, had not bust out into a loud laugh. "Oh, Godfather Drosselmeier, you are so funny today," he cried. "You are going on exactly like my old jumping jack, which I threw away behind the stove a long time ago." But their mother said, looking seriously: "Dear Mr. Counselor, this is a strange kind of fun. What may be the meaning of it?" "Dear me," answered Drosselmeier, laughing, "don't you remember my pretty clockmaker song? I am in the way of singing it always to patients like Mary." Then he sat down close to Mary's bed and said: "You must not be offended if I have not cut out all the Mouse King's 14 eyes, but that is out of the question, and instead of it I am going to give you great pleasure." With this the counselor put his hand into his pocket, and what he now slowly drew forth was no other than the Nutcracker, whose lost teeth had been very cleverly set in firm again, and mended his broken jaw. Mary cried out for joy, and her mother said with a smile: "You see now how well Godfather Drosselmeier meant by your Nutcracker." "Then you must own, Mary," interrupted the counselor, "and you must own also that Nutcracker has not grown quite so straight as he might have done, and that his looks can't be called handsome. If you care to hear it, I will tell you how this ugliness came into this family. Or perhaps you already know the history of Princess Pirlipat, of which Mousykins, and of the skillful clockmaker." "Just listen," suddenly broke in Fred. "Just listen, Godfather Drosselmeier. You have put the Nutcracker's teeth right enough, and his chin is no more so wobbly. But why is his sword gone? And why have you not given him a sword?" "Eh," replied the counselor, not very well pleased. "You fuss and find fault about everything, youngster. What business of mine is Nutcracker's sword? I have healed his body, and he can get a sword for himself as he pleases." "That's true," cried Fred. "If he's a brave fellow, he will soon manage to find weapons." "Well, Mary, went on the counselor. "Tell me if you know the story of Princess Pirlipat." No, answered Mary. "Do tell us it, dear Godfather Drosselmere, do tell us." "I hope," said the doctor's wife, "I hope, my dear counselor, that your story is not such a creepy one as those you tell usually are." "Not at all, dearest lady," answered Drosselmere. "On the contrary, what I am going to have the honor to lay before you is very amusing." "Do tell us! Oh, do, dear godfather!" cried the children, and the counselor thus began his tale. A story within a story. Peace, love, and Pokemon. It's good to see you, Ancient Mew. I hope you're doing well. 19 legs. Y'all are great. Storyception, story within a story. Again, this isn't the story of the Nutcracker. This is the story that inspired the Nutcracker. Chapter 7. The Story of the Hard Nut. Pirlipat's mother was the wife of a king, that is, a queen, and Pirlipat herself was a born princess from the moment of her birth. The king went wild for joy over his lovely little daughter, as she lay in the cradle. In his exultation he danced and whirled about on one leg and cried out over and over again, "Hurrah! Has anybody ever seen anything more beautiful than my Pirlipatkin?" Then all the ministers, generals, presidents of departments, and staff officers hopped about on one leg like their sovereign, crying out with their might, "No, never!" But indeed it was not to be denied that in all the world there could be no more beautiful child than Princess Pirlipat. Her little face seemed to be woven out of delicate lily white and rose red silk. Her eyes wore brightly sparkling blue, and it was pretty to see how her hair curled like shining threads of gold. Besides, Pirlipatkin had brought into the world two small rows of pearly teeth, with which, an hour or two after her birth, she bit the High Chancellor's finger as he bent down to examine her features closely, so that he shrieked out loudly, "Oh, Gemini!" Others maintained that he cried out, "Oh, Creaky! Crikey!" Spelled Cricky. And opinions are strongly divided on the point to this day. But the fact is, Pirlipatkin actually bit the High Chancellor's finger, and the enraptured nation how recognized that wit, spirit, and intelligence all at once dwelt in her little angelic body. In short, everybody was delighted. Only the queen showed herself anxious and ill at ease. Nobody knew why. It seemed strange that she had Pirlipat's cradle watched so carefully. Not only were the doors guarded by men-at-arms, but without counting the two nurses beside the cradle, 6 others had to sit round about in the room night after night. Then, what appeared quite ridiculous, and what no one could understand, each of these 6 nurses must sit with a cat on her lap, and stroke it so as to keep it purring all night. You could never guess, dear children, why Pirlipat's mother took all these precautions, but I know I will tell you now. It happened that once a number of illustrious kings and highly distinguished princes had assembled in the court of Pirlipat's father, on whose account there were grand doings, and many tournaments, plays, and court balls. The king, in order to prove beyond a doubt that he had no lack of gold and silver, was minded for once in a way to dip deeply into the crown treasures and bring out something worthy of the occasion. To this end, being privately informed by the chief cook that the court astronomer had announced the propitious day for pork butchering, he ordered a great making of meat puddings and sausages, then jumped into a carriage that he might personally invite the collected kings and princes, only to a plate of soup, as he put it, the better to enjoy their surprises over a costly banquet. Next, he addressed the lady queen in his most winning tones. "It is well known to you, my dear, how fond I am of sausage meat." The queen knew very well what he would be at. It was just this. that she herself, as she had often done before, should undertake the serious cookery business with her own loyal hands. Her high treasurer must at once send the great golden sausage pot and the silver stew pans to the kitchen. A huge fire of sandalwood was kindled there. The queen tied on her damask cooking apron, and soon all the pots and pans steamed with the sweet odors of pudding making. Right up to the council chamber stole this tempting smell, till the king, seized by hearty delight, could not restrain himself. "Excuse me, my lords," he exclaimed, flew quickly down to the kitchen, kissed the queen, did a little stirring of the pot with his gold scepter, and then went back well pleased to the council. Now it came to that important point when the bacon should be cut into little bits and broiled upon the silver gridiron. The court lady stood aside, since the queen, out of loyalty and respect for her loyal husband, would fain perform this task alone. But as soon as the bacon began to sputter, a tiny wee whispering voice made itself heard. "Give me, too, some of your fry, my sister. I want to taste. I, a queen like yourself. Give me some of the fry." The queen knew well that it was Lady Mousykins who spoke thus. Lady Mousykins had lived for many years in the king's palace. She declared herself related to the royal family, and that she was the queen in the realm of Mousedom. Wherefore she also kept a great court under the hearthstone. Now our queen was the kind, good-natured lady, and while she would not exactly recognize Lady Mousykins as a queen and her sister, she had not the heart to grudge her a taste of the nice things on feast days, and called out, "Come along, Lady Mousykins, you may always taste my bacon." Thereupon out popped Lady Mousykins very smartly, jumped on to the hearth, and with her pretty little paws snapped up one shred of bacon after another which the queen held out to her. But next came leaping forth all the uncles and cousins of Lady Mousykins, and into the bargain of her 7 sons, right mischievous scamps, who threw themselves on the bacon, not to be kept off for all the frightened queen could do. Luckily, the chief lady-in-waiting arrived to the rescue, and hunted away these troublesome guests, so that some of the bacon was still saved from their clutches, which had to be scientifically divided among the sausages after the direction of the court mathematician called in for the purpose. Trumpets and kettle drums resounded as the invited potentats and princes came in gorgeous robes of state to the sausage feast, some on white ambling palfreys and some in crystal coaches. The king welcomed them with hearty friendliness and courtesy, then took his place bearing the royal crown and scepter at the head of the table. When the white puddings were first served, it could be seen how his majesty grew always parlor, how he raised his eyes, his bosom heaved with sighs, violent pangs were evidently raging within him. But when they reached the course of the black puddings, he sank back in his armchair, sobbing and moaning. He covered his face with his hands, and he broke forth into a loud lamentations. All present sprang to their feet. The body physician in vain made an effort to feel the king's pulse. He seemed convulsed by some deep, nameless anguish. At length, after many suggestions, after the use of strong remedies, burning of feathers under his nose, and such like, his majesty, being so far brought to himself, stammered out almost inaudibly these words: "Too little bacon." "Oh, my poor unhappy royal spouse!" sobbed the disconsolate queen, throwing herself at his feet. "Ah, what pain you must be suffering! But here you see the guilty one before you. Punish her severely. Ah, Lady Mousykins it was, with her 7 sons, her uncles and cousins, who have eaten up the bacon," and thereupon the poor queen fell back in a swoon. "Chief lady-in-waiting, how was this?" cried the king, rising up full of wrath. The chief lady-in-waiting related what had happened as well as she could, and the king vowed to take revenge upon Lady Mousykins and her family, who had eaten up the bacon out of his sausages. The Privy Council being summoned, it was resolved to prosecute Lady Mousykins and to confiscate her property. But as the king considered she might meanwhile go on eating his bacon, the matter was at once placed in the hands of the court clockmaker and engineer. This man, who was named exactly like myself, Christian Ellis Drosselmeyer, undertook by means of a single piece of statecraft to banish Lady Mousykins and her family forever from the royal palace. He contrived, accordingly, certain small, artfully constructed machines in which shreds of toasted bacon were fastened upon the thread, and these Drosselmeyer placed around about the habitation of the bacon nibblers. Lady Mousykins was much too clever not to see through his cunning, but all her warnings, all her lectures were thrown away on her 7 sons and many, many of her uncles and cousins who, enticed by the sweet smell of the bait, ventured within Drosselmeyer's machines, then, as soon as they tried to gnaw away at the bacon, found themselves trapped by the grating that fell suddenly behind them, and delivered to shameful execution in the very kitchen where they enjoyed such pleasant feasts. With her small band of surviving subjects, Lady Mousykins abandoned the scene of horror. Woe, despair, and revenge filled her breast. The courtiers exulted, but the queen was troubled, knowing the nature of Mousykins, and too well aware that she would not leave her sons and kinsmen unavenged. Indeed, as her majesty was one day cooking a fricassee of lights, lungs of pork or beef, a dish much loved by her kingly husband, Lady Mousykins appeared and said, "My sons, my cousins, and kinsmen are dead. Take good heed that the Mouse Queen bit not thy little princess in two. Take good heed, ha ha." With this she went off and was no more seen, but the queen stood so terrified that she let the fricassee fall into the fire, and for a second time Lady Mousykins had spoiled one of the king's favorite dishes, whereat he was very angry. But now that is enough of this evening, the rest another time. Earnestly, as Mary, who had her own ideas of this story, begged Godfather Drosselmeyer to go on with it, he would not let himself be persuaded, but jumped up, saying, "Too much at once is not good, more tomorrow." Then, as he was just going out of the door, Fred asked, "But do tell us, Godfather Drosselmeyer, is it really true that you invented mousetraps?" "How can you talk such nonsense?" cried his mother, but the counselor laughed in his queer way. "I am not a clever clockmaker." "And must not mousetraps have been invented somehow or another?" Drosselmeyer is weird. "Ernie!" It's good to see you, Ernie. "Listening, but need to get things ready for dinner, feeding 11 people tonight. No worries at all, Leighton and Layla. You're good kids. I appreciate you helping out with dinner and all that." Let's see, at about hour and a half. Let's keep going. I'm under the impression that Drosselmeyer is probably like a wizard of sorts. Mhm. Chapter 8. The Story of the Hard Nut continued. "Now you see, children," so the counselor continued the next evening, "why the queen had the wonderfully beautiful little princess Pirlipat watched over with such care, she was not right to fear that Lady Mousykins would fulfill her threat by coming back to bite her royal baby in two. Drosselmeyer's machines were of no use at all against the cautious and crafty Mouse Queen, and only the court astronomer, who was also privy interpreter of omens and stars, could divine that the family of Pussy Purr had all the power of keeping off mice from the cradle. So it came about that one of the sons of this family, attached to the court with the title of chamber counselors, was held on her lap by each nurse, whose duty was to tickle him into contented performance of such laborious public service. It was the midnight hour, as one of the nurses in chief, who sat close to the cradle, startled up from a deep sleep. All around lay burdened in slumber. There was no murmur, a silence as of death, in which could be heard the faint click of the death watch worm. But what were the feelings of the chief nurse when, right before her, she made out a great ugly mouse standing on its hind paws and laying its murderous head on the face of the princess? With a cry of horror, she sprang to her feet. Everyone awoke, but in an instant Lady Mousykins, the huge mouse on Perlipit's cradle, could be no other, scampered off to the corner of the room. The 4-footed chamber counselors rushed after her, too late. She had vanished through a crack in the floor. Then, at the noise, Pirlipat awoke, weeping piteously. "Thank heaven!" cried the nurses. "She is still alive." How great was their dismay, however, when they looked at Pirlipatkin and saw what had come to the sweet tender child. Instead of the angelic white and rosy curled haired Pate, a thick, distorted head stood on a small, shrunken, crooked body. The sky blue eyes had changed into green, goggling balls, staring straight before them, and the pretty little mouth gaped from ear to ear. The queen was ready to die for weeping and lamentation, and the king's study had to be hung with wadded tapestry, since again and again he ran his head against the wall, exclaiming in the most lamentable tones, "Oh, unlucky monarch!" Now might he seen it that were better to eat his sausages without bacon, and to leave Lady Mousykins and her kindred in peace beneath the hearthstone, but Pirlipat's royal father had no such thought. Rather, he threw all the blame on the court clockmaker and engineer, Christian Ellis Drosselmeyer of Nuremberg. Therefore, he sagely gave command as follows: within 4 weeks must Drosselmeyer restore the princess to her former state, or at least suggest some trustworthy means of doing so. Else should he suffer a shameful death under the executioner's axe. Drosselmeyer was not a little alarmed, yet soon he took courage to trust his art and good luck, and at once set about the first operation which seemed to him likely to be of use. He very skillfully took Pirlipat to pieces, screwed off her hands and arms, and examined her construction inside, but thus he had the vexation of discovering that the bigger the princess grew and more unshapely she would become, and he could hit on no way of mending the matter. He carefully put the princess together again, and sank down in gloomy dejection beside her cradle, which he durst not leave day or night. The 4th week had come, and was already Wednesday, when the king looked in with angry eyes, and shaking his sceptre at him, cried, "Christian Elias Drosselmeyer, set the princess to rights, or thou must die." Drosselmeyer began to weep bitterly, but the little Princess Pirlipat went on contentedly cracking nuts. For the first time the clockmaker was struck by Pirlipat's unusual appetite for nuts, and by the circumstance that she had come with her teeth into the world. Indeed, after her transformation, she had gone on screaming just till she happened to have a nut given to her, which she at once cracked, ate the kernel, and then became quiet. Since then, nurses could never be done bringing nuts for her. "O sacred instinct of nature, eternal mysterious symphony of all existence!" exclaimed Christian Elias Drosselmeyer. "Thou showest me the gate of the secret. I will knock, and it will open." He forthwith sought permission to consult the court astronomer, and was taken to him under the strong guard. The 2 officers embraced each other with merry tears, being devoted friends, then retired into a private cabinet to turn over many books, which treated of instinct, of sympathy and antipathy, and of course mysteries. Night coming on, the royal astronomer consulted the stars, and with the help of Drosselmeyer, also well versed in the same art, drew out Princess Pirlipat's horoscope. This proved a hard task, for the lines of fate became more and more entangled as they went on. But at last, oh joy, it lay clear before them that to destroy the enchantment which had so hideously deformed her, and to be made as beautiful as ever, the Princess Pirlipat had nothing to do but to eat the sweet kernel of the nutcracker, of the nut Crackatuck. The nut Crackatuck had such a hard shell that a 48-pound cannon would be driven over it, could be driven over it without breaking it. This hard nut must be cracked by the teeth of a man who had never shaved and never worn boots, and he must hand it to the princess with his eyes shut, and not open them till he had taken 7 steps backwards without stumbling. 3 days and 3 nights did Drosselmeyer and the astronomer work unceasingly, and it was only on Saturday, at the king's dinner time, that Drosselmeyer, who was to be beheaded on Sunday, burst in, full of triumphant joy, to announce the discovery of the means of restoring the princess's lost beauty. The king, embracing him with warm affection, promised him a sword set in diamonds, 4 orders of chivalry, and 2 new Sunday coats. Immediately after dinner, set about the business, he bade. See to it, dear engineer, that the young unshaven man in shoes is provided, along with the nut Crackatuck, and let him drink no wine beforehand, for fear of his stumbling when he takes 7 steps backwards like a crab. After that, he can soak himself to his heart's content. Drosselmeyer was sadly taken aback by the king's speech, and not without consternation and trembling, he stammered forth the means of a cure indeed were discovered, but that the nut and the young man to bite it were still to seek. Indeed, there was some doubt whether nut and nutcracker could ever be found. Then you must be beheaded after all, roared the king in a lion's voice, wrathfully brandishing the scepter above his crowned head. Luckily, it was for poor Drosselmeyer that the king had enjoyed his dinner that day, as to be in good humor for listening to the arguments which the monogamous queen did not fail to bring forward in favor of one whose sad fate had touched her heart. Drosselmeyer plucked up courage and represented his own part, that he had dutifully fulfilled the task set him, and he had earned his pardon by pointing out how the princess could be cured. The king said this was all stuff and nonsense, but finally decided, after he had taken a glass of stomach cordial, that both the clockmaker and the astronomer should set forth, not to return without the nut Crackatuck in their pockets. The man to bite it open, as the queen suggested, must be sought for through repeated insertions of an advertisement in the home and foreign newspaper. Here the counselor again broke off, promising to relate the rest next evening. Glory! Easy dinner tonight, burgers and homemade fries with fresh veggie salad if wanted. Fresh fruit salad and homemade ice cream for dessert. Let's go. That sounds amazing, Leighton. My last 4 children arrived on Friday afternoon to New Zealand. Anna and I are going to pick them up from the airport near our home in the city, then back to the homestead. Let's go. That sounds great. I love family. That does sound yummy. All right. All right. Chapter 9. The story of the hard nut concluded. Next evening, as soon as the candles were lighted, Godfather Drosselmeyer made his appearance and went on with his story as follows. 15 years were Drosselmeyer and the court astronomer on their travels without coming on a trace of the nut Crackatuck, where they wandered far and wide. What strange, wonderful things they fell in with. All this I could go on telling you for a month, but will do nothing of the kind. Enough to say that the sore-troubled Drosselmeyer was at length seized by a mighty longing for his native place, Nuremberg. With extraordinary violence, this longing one day overpowered him, and he sat in a great wood in Asia, smoking a pipe of tobacco with his friend. Oh, my beautiful mother city, who never has seen thee as much to pity, though he travel to London, to Rome, to Bern. After thee his heart must always yearn. After thee, oh, Nuremberg, town so dear, that hath beautiful houses and windows clear. As Drosselmeyer lifted up his voice so dolefully, the astronomer was moved by deep sympathy, and began to give forth such lamentable howls that they could be heard over a great part of Asia. Then, composing himself, he wiped the tears from his eyes and asked, "But, my worthy colleague, why do we sit here and cry? Why not go to Nuremberg, since it is all one how we can search for that fated nut Crackatuck?" "That's true enough," answered Drosselmeyer, taking comfort. Both at once stood up, knocked the ashes out of their pipes, and went off in a straight line, without stopping, from the wood in the middle of Asia to the city of Nuremberg. Scarcely had they arrived there that Drosselmeyer hastened to his cousin, the doll-maker, varnisher, and gilder, Christopher Zacharias Drosselmeyer, whom he had not seen for many, many years. To him now the clockmaker related the whole history of Princess Pirlipat, of the Lady Mousykins, and of the nut Crackatuck, so that he struck his hands together and cried out full of astonishment, "Ah, cousin, cousin, what a wonderful story!" Drosselmeyer went on to tell of the adventures of his long travel, and how he spent 2 years with the Date King, how he was contemptuously turned away by the Prince of Almonds, how he made inquiries in vain in the Natural History Society in Squirrelstown, in short, how everywhere he had failed to get even a hint about the nut Crackatuck. During this narration, Christopher Zacharias had kept snapping his fingers, turning about on one foot, clicking with his tongue, and exclaiming, ah, oh, the deuce? Finally, he threw up his cap and wig up in the air, warmly embraced his kinsman, and cried out, "Cousin, cousin, you are saved! Saved you are, I say, for I am much mistaken if I myself do not possess the nut Crackatuck." At the same time he pulled out a box from which he drew forth a gilded nut of middling bigness. "See," he said, showing the nut to his cousin, "this is the state of the case. Years ago a foreigner came to me at Christmas time with a sack full of nuts which he wanted to sell. Right before my shop he got into a quarrel and laid down the sack that he might better defend himself against the nut sellers of the town, who would not allow the stranger to sell nuts here, and attacked him on this account." Excuse me. At that moment a heavily loaded wagon rolled over the sack, and all the nuts were broken except one, which the foreigner, with a queer smile, offered me in exchange for a silver groat of the year 1720. It struck me as singular that I found in my pocket just such a coin as the man wanted. So I bought the nut and gilded it, hardly knowing myself why I paid so dear for a thing and treated it as such value. All doubt of the cousin's not being that long sought after one became at once removed when the astronomer summoned into council cleverly scraped away the gilding, and on the rind of the nut found engraved in Chinese characters the word Crackatuck. Great was the joy of the travelers, and the cousin the happiest man under the sun, when Drosselmeyer assured him of his fortune being made, for, besides a good pension, he should henceforth receive gratis all the gold leaf he needed for his gilding. Both the clockmaker and the astronomer had already put on their nightcaps and were going to bed when the latter, that is, the astronomer, thus began. "My beloved colleague, one piece of luck comes not alone. Believe me, we have found not only the nut Crackatuck, but also a young man who can crack it and restore the princess to her beauty. I mean no one else than the son of your worthy cousin. Nay, I will not sleep," he continued enthusiastically, "but this very night will cast the youth's horoscope." Therewith he tore off his nightcap and at once set about taking observations. The cousin's son was indeed a nice, well-grown young man, who had never yet shaved or worn boots. In his earlier youth he had acted as a jumping jack for several Christmases, but that was not at least perceptible, as his father had taken so much pain to educate him and set him straight. At Christmas time he wore a fine red coat laced with gold, a sword, a hat under his arm, and a first-class head of hair gathered into a bag behind. So splendidly adorned he stood in his father's shop, and out of natural politeness cracked nuts for the young ladies, on which account they called him the handsome little nutcracker. "It is he!" cried the astronomer next morning, falling rapturously on the clockmaker's neck. "We have him! He is found! But two things, dearest colleague, must be seen to. In the first place, you must provide your excellent kinsman with a strong wooden head, having under jaw that would stand a good strain. Then, on arriving at the capital, we ought to keep it carefully secret that we have brought along with us a young man to bite open the nut Crackatuck. He should come on the scene some time later. I read in the horoscope that the king, after some others have broken their teeth over it to no purpose, will promise the hand of the princess and succession to the kingdom as a reward for whoever can crack the nut and restore Pirlipat's lost beauty." Drosselmeyer's cousin, the doll-maker, was well contented that his youngster should marry the Princess Pirlipat and become the prince and king. and he left the whole charge of the business to the messengers. The head, which Drosselmeyer fitted to his hopeful young nephew, turned out really well, so that he made the most successful experiments at cracking the hardest peach stones. As soon as Drosselmeyer and the astronomer found at the palace their arrival with the nut Krakatuk, the necessary advertisements, almost said advertisements, which is also correct, were at once published, and these travelers being now supplied with the beauty charm, many fine young men, some of them princes, eagerly came forward, trusting in their sound jaws to undertake Pirlipat's disenchantment. The messengers were not a little horrified when they saw the princess again. Her small body, with its shrunken members, could scarcely support the huge, unshapely head, while the hideousness of her countenance was enhanced by a white woolly beard that had grown over her mouth and chin. All happened just as the court astronomer had read in the horoscope. One youngster in shoes after another bit away at the nut Krakatuk till he broke his teeth and jaws, without doing the princess at least good. And as each was then borne away, half fainting, by the dentist kept ready at hand, he would moan out, "That was a hard nut!" When now the king, and the anguish of his heart, promised daughter and kingdom to whoever would perform the disenchantment, there presented himself that pretty lad from Nuremberg, and modestly begged permission to make a trial. None of the candidates had pleased the princess so much as young Drosselmeyer. She laid her little hand on her heart and sighed deeply. Ah, if it were he who should bite open the nut Krakatuk and become my husband. After most civilly saluting the king and queen, and also the Princess Pirlipat, young Drosselmeyer took the nut Krakatuk from the chief master of ceremonies, put it between his teeth, worked his head powerfully, and crack, crack, the shell broke into several bits, dexterously picking from the kernel the rough fibers about it, and handed it to the princess with respectful scrape of his foot, then closed his eyes and began to step backward. The princess at once swallowed the nut, and oh wonder! The deformity was gone, and there in its place stood an angelic figure, the face dimply rosy red and lily white, the eyes of shining blue, and the long locks curled like threads of gold. Music of trumpets and kettle drums swelled the loud exultation of the people and king, and his court danced. The king and his whole court danced on one leg at Pirlipat's birth, and the queen had to be treated with eau du cologne, having fainted away in her transports of joy. Young Drosselmeyer, who had still the 7 steps backwards to accomplish, was not a little flustered by his great tumult. He had kept his balance, and stood raising his right foot for the last step, when Lady Mousykins, squeaking and squealing shrilly, ran out of the floor, so that, in the act of setting down his foot, he trampled upon her, which made him stumble, and he almost fallen. Oh, mishap! Suddenly was the youth becoming as deformed as object as Princess Pirlipat before? His body shrank up, and he could scarcely bear the weight of his big, unshapely head, with great eyes staring out of it, and broad, horribly gaping mouth. Instead of his fine bunch of hair, there hung behind him a kind of narrow wooden cloak, with which his lower jaw was worked. Clockmaker and astronomer stood beside themselves for dread and amazement, yet they saw how Lady Mousykins rolled all bleeding on the floor. Her ill nature had not gone unpunished, for, with the sharp heel of his shoe, young Drosselmeyer had trodden so hard on her neck that she must die. And writhing in her death agony, she squeaked and squawked pitiably. "Oh, Krakatuk, hard nut that proves my end! Ah, Nutcracker, thy hour is now at hand. Woe is me! But also woe to thee, my son, the Mouse King, with the 7 crowns, will soon avenge his murdered mother's wrongs on thee, thou ugly, spoiled, conceited doll. O life so fair and bright, from which I fall, 2 shades of gloomy death. I flail for breath, my last I speak. Oh, ah, eh, squeak." With this cry expired Lady Mousykins, and was carried out by the royal firemender Hitherto no one had thought of young Drosselmere, but now Pirlipat reminded the king of his promise, and at once he ordered the hero of the day to be brought forward. But when the unfortunate fellow showed himself in all his deformity, the princess held both hands before her eyes, crying, "Away! Away with the hideous nutcracker!" Forthwith the high marshal seized him by the narrow shoulders and threw him out of the door. The king, full of rage that a nutcracker should be forced upon him as son-in-law, put all the blame on the clockmaker and the astronomer, and banished them forever from his capital. That had not appeared in the horoscope which the astronomer cast at Nuremberg, but he did not fail to make fresh observations, and now read in the stars that young Drosselmere might take heart in his new condition, for, in spite of his deformity, he should yet become a prince and a king. His unshapeliness, however, could disappear only when the seven-headed heir of Lady Mousykins, whom she had borne after the death of her 7 elder sons, should have been slain by his hand, and when the lady had fallen in love with him, deformed as he was. You must have actually seen young Drosselmere about Christmas time in his father's shop at Nuremberg, a nutcracker, it is true, but also a prince in disguise. There, children, is the story of the hard nut. And now you know why people are so often say that it was a hard nut to crack, and how it comes the nutcrackers are so ugly. So ended the counselor's tale. Mary thought the Princess Pirlipat was an ill-natured, ungrateful thing, but Fred assured her that if Nutcracker were a brave fellow, he would easily do for the Mouse King, and soon regain his former lovely appearance. Fair enough. What a way to describe that. I know, that was very dramatic. I'm sorry, y'all. I didn't think it would get that grotesque, but I found it quite humorous that, like, her dying speech rhymed, and it ended with a squeak. Rick Rips, how's it going, fam? Good to see you. I hope you're doing well tonight, getting everything that you set out to get. But as I mentioned, this was the original story, and now you can see, like, wow, the Nutcracker turned into that. This is where it started. I really like that, the origin of a tough nut to crack, and why the Nutcrackers are typically a little uglier. I thought that was really cool. 24 likes. Sorry I'm late to the pine. No worries at all. No sorries needed. Hello, beautiful people. What's going on, Joseph Shepard? How are you doing tonight? It is good to see you. I hope you're getting everything you set out to get today as well. We are currently reading through The Nutcracker and the Mouse King, which is the story that inspired the classic tale of the Nutcracker. And we're just entering chapter 10, which is Uncle and Nephew. If I ever happen to any of my honored hearers or readers to get cut by glass, he will know for himself how much it hurts, and what a bad thing it is altogether, since it takes so long to heal. Mary had to spend nearly a whole week in bed, and when she got up she felt quite light-headed. But at last she grew well again, and could run about her room as merrily as ever. The glass cupboard made a fine show, for there stood, all new and clean, the trees and flowers and toy houses, and the beautiful splendid dolls. First of all, Mary looked for her dear Nutcracker, who, from his place on the second shelf, smiled back to her with his teeth quite in good order. As she again so affectionately surveyed her favorite, it suddenly came into her troubled heart that all Godfather Drosselmere's tale was nothing but the history of this Nutcracker and his feud with Lady Mousykins and her son. Now she saw that her Nutcracker could be no other than young Drosselmere of Nuremberg, the Godfather's handsome nephew, so unhappily transformed by Lady Mousykins. For that the skilful clockmaker of the court of Pirlipat's father was nobody but Councillor Drosselmere himself. Mary had never doubted for a moment, even while listening to the tale. "But why did your uncle not help you? Why did he not help you?" lamented Mary, as she always more and more vividly conceived the idea that in the battle of which she had been witness, Nutcracker's kingdom and crown were at stake. Were not all the other toys his subjects, and was it not sure that the court astronomer's prophecies would be fulfilled, and young Drosselmeer become king of Toyland? Wise Mary went on turning the matter over in her mind till she believed that Nutcracker and his vassals had actually the life and motion which she attributed to them in her imagination. But it was not so. Everything in the cupboard remained stiffer and stiller than ever, and Mary, resolutely clinging to her inner conviction, put the blame of this on the continued enchantment worked by Lady Mousykins and her seven-headed son. Yet, she said out loud to the Nutcracker, if you are not in a condition to move yourself, or to speak to me at least a little word, I know, dear Herr Drosselmeyer, that you can understand me and my goodwill to you, so you may count on my assistance in the hour of need. At all events, I will ask your uncle to give you the aid of his skill where it is necessary. Nutcracker remained quiet and still, but to Mary it seemed that a light sigh breathed through the cupboard door, the glass panes thrilling forth almost inaudibly, but in wondrously sweet tones, as if a small bell note were singing, Mary mine, protectress dear, I will be thine, O Mary dear. In the ice-cold shudder which came over her, Mary yet felt a strange joy. Twilight now drew on. Her father entered the room with Godfather Drosselmeer. Then it was not long before Louisa set out the tea table, and the family sat round it, talking pleasantly about all sorts of things. Mary had quietly brought her small armchair and placed herself at the godfather's feet. When the others, for a moment, were silent, she looked with her great blue eyes right into the counselor's face and said, I know now, dear godfather, that my Nutcracker is your nephew, the young Drosselmeer from Nuremberg. He has become a prince, or rather a king. So much has come true, as your companion the astronomer prophesied. But you know well that he is at the open war with Lady Mousykins' son, the ugly Mouse King. Why don't you give him help? Mary further related the whole course of the battle that she had witnessed it, and was often interrupted by her mother and Louisa laughing at her. Only Fred and the counselor kept their gravity. Wherever did the girl get all that silly stuff in her head? Said the doctor. Oh, she has lively imagination, answered her mother. These are just dreams which came from a feverish after her hurt. It is not. It is all not true, said Fred. My Hausers are not such cowards. But Godfather Drosselmeer, smiling queerly, took the little girl on his lap and spoke more softly than ever. Ah, my dear Mary, to you belongs a gift denied to me and to us all. You are a born princess like Pirlipat, for you reign in a beautiful bright kingdom, but you have much to suffer if you make the cause of poor deformed Nutcracker your own. For the Mouse King persecutes him in all ways, yet you, not I, you alone can save him, if you will only be loyal and steadfast. Neither Mary nor anyone else knew what Drosselmeyer meant by these words. Indeed, they seemed to the doctor so odd that he felt the counselor's pulse and said, My good friend, you have your head all wrong. I will prescribe something for you. But the doctor's wife shook her head thoughtfully and said half to herself, I can guess what the counselor means, though I can't put it into plain words. Great rest of the night. We're good. Been a busy day. 26 likes. Let's go. Appreciate you guys. Getting into chapter 11. The Victory. Not long afterward, Mary had awakened one moonlit night by a strange tumult that seemed to come from one corner of the room. It was as if pebbles were being thrown and rolled about amid a hideous accompaniment of hissing and squeaking. Ah, the mice! The mice are coming back! Cried Mary in terror, and would have waked her mother, but she could not utter a sound or even move a finger. as she saw the Mouse King working himself through a hole in the wall, till at length, with sparkling eyes and shining crowns, he advanced into the room. Then with a mighty bound sprang up on the small table which stood close to Mary's bed. He! I must give me your sugar plums, your toffee, small things, else I bite that nutcracker of yours to pieces. Nutcracker, do you hear? So piped out the Mouse King, gnashing and clashing horribly with his teeth, and quickly sprang out of sight again through the mouse hole. Mary was so distressed by the dreadful apparition that the next morning she looked quite pale, and could scarcely speak for inward agitation. 100 times she thought of telling what had happened to her mother or to Louisa, or at least to Fred, but she asked herself, will any of them believe me? And shall I not be well laughed at by everybody? Yet it was quite clear to her she must sacrifice her sugar plums and toffee to save Nutcracker. As much as she had of these nice things she laid out that evening on the edges of the cupboard shelf, next morning her mother said, I don't know how the mice have gotten into our parlor. Just see, poor Mary, they have eaten up all your sweet stuff. Indeed it was so. The sticky toffee had not proved much to the taste of the greedy Mouse King. But he had nibbled all over it with his sharp teeth, so that it must be thrown away. Mary did not take the loss of her sweets much to heart. Rather, she secretly rejoiced to think that it had saved Nutcracker's life. But what were her feelings when next night there came again a squeaking and squawking in her ear? Ah, it was the Mouse King back again, and still more horribly glowed his eyes than the night before, and still more hatefully hissed he between his teeth. Must give me your sugar and gingerbread figures, little thing, or I'll bite your Nutcracker in pieces. And with this away scampered the grim Mouse King. In great distress, Mary went next morning to the cupboard, and sorrowfully looked at her sugar and gingerbread men. She had reason indeed to be sorrowful, for you can't think, my good reader, what dear little figures made out of sugar and gingerbread Mary Stahlbaum possessed. First of all, a very pretty shepherd, with the shepherdess was feeding a whole herd of milk-white sheep, and his dog jumped close by, quite like life. Then came 2 postmen with letters in their hands, and 4 fine couples with nicely dressed young men, and with maidens elegantly adorned all over, were rocking themselves in a swing boat. Behind some ballet dancers stood Old King Cole beside the Maid of Orleans, for whom Mary did not care so very much, but right back in the corner was a red-cheeked little child, her favorite of all. The tears sprang into small Mary's eyes. Oh, dear Herr Drosselmeyer, she cried, turning to the Nutcracker. Whatever will I do? Whatever will I not do to save you? But still, it's hard. Nutcracker, the while, looked so sad that Mary, who could fancy she saw the Mouse King's 7 jaws open to devour the unhappy youth, resolved to sacrifice everything for his sake. All her sugar figures she set out that evening on the edge of the shelf. As before, she had done with her goodies. She kissed the shepherd, the shepherdess, the little lambs, and last of all she fetched from the corner her favorite, the dear red-cheeked child, whom she took care to put behind the rest. The gingerbread Old King Cole and the Maid of Orleans had to stand in the first row. Oh, this is too bad, exclaimed her mother next morning. There must be a great nasty mouse living in the cupboard, for all poor Mary's pretty sugar figures were gnawed and bitten to bits. Mary could hardly keep back her tears, but she soon smiled again at the thought. What does it matter so long as Nutcracker is safe? In the evening, when her mother told the counselor about the mischief a mouse did when in the children's cupboard, Dr. Stahlbaum remarked what a pity it was that they could not get rid of this pest, which played such tricks in the cupboard and ate up Mary's sweet things. Well, put in Fred eagerly, the baker who lives below us, he's a fine gray. Chamber counselor, which I can bring up. He will soon stop these doings and bite off the mouse's head, were it Lady Mousykins herself or her son, the Mouse King. Yes, by jumping about on chairs and tables, laughed his mother, and upsetting cups and glasses, and doing ever so much more damage. Not at all, answered Fred. The baker's cat is a clever fellow. I wish I could walk as steadily along the sharp roof as he can. Only let us have no puss at night, begged Louisa, who could not bear cats. Fred is right, said his father, but first we might try setting a trap. Have we none? We can get the best kind from Godfather Drosselmeyer, who invented them, cried Fred. All the rest laughed, and the mistress declaring that there was no trap in the house, the counselor said he had several, and sent at once for a first-class one. Their godfather's story of the hard nut came now clearly into the mind of Mary and Fred. While cook was toasting the bacon, Mary trembling with excitement, and her head full of story and its marvels, thus addressed their familiar familiar Betsy. Ah, Lady Queen, do beware of Mousykins and her family. But Fred had drawn his sword, biting the whole race of mice. Come on, and he would soon clear them off. All, however, remained still under and about the hearthstone, when now the counselor tied the share of bacon on a thin thread and softly, softly laid the trap in the cupboard. Fred called out, Take care, Godfather Clockmaker, that the Mouse King plays you no trick. Ah, what had poor Mary to go through that night? There came an ice cold creeping up and down her arm, and a loathsome breath on her cheek, and a piping and squeaking in her ear. The horrible Mouse King sat on her shoulder, blood-red foam dripping out of his 7 open jaws, and gnashing and clashing with his teeth, he hissed out to Mary as she lay motionless for fear and dread. Hiss, hiss, none of your bacon. Mouse King too sharp, not to be taken. Trap very fine, but not what it looks. Give me out now your picture books, do you hear? And your new frock too, else there shall be no peace for you. You very well know, Nutcracker must go. I will tear him so. Ha ha, pee pee, squeak squeak. Now that Mary, overcome by sorrow and woe, she looked so pale and out of sorts that when her mother, next morning, remarked that the mouse had not been caught, believing Mary to be afraid of it and distressed about the loss of her sweet, she added, But never mind, dear child. We will soon get rid of the naughty mouse. If traps are no good, Fred must bring up his great chamber counselor. As soon as Mary found herself alone in the parlor, she went up to the glass cupboard and, sobbing, spoke thus to her Nutcracker. Ah, my dear, good Herr Drosselmeyer, what can a poor unhappy girl do for you? Were I to give all my picture books, even my beautiful new frock, which I got as a Christmas present, to be torn to pieces by the horrible Mouse King, will he not then go on asking more and more, so that at last I shall have nothing left to give? And he will want to bite, uh, up me myself instead of you. Oh, poor girl that I am! What can I do now? What am I to do now? Weeping and lamenting so bitterly, little Mary noticed that through the night a great spot of blood had been left on Nutcracker's neck. Ever since she knew that her Nutcracker was properly young Drosselmeyer, the counselor's nephew, she had given up carrying him in her arms and cuddled and kissed him no more. Indeed, out of a certain shyness, she hardly liked to touch him. Yet now she took him very carefully out of the cupboard and began to rub the blood spot from his neck with her pocket handkerchief. But what was her amazement when she all at once felt Nutcracker growing warm in her hands and beginning to move his limbs. Quickly she set him back in the cupboard, where his little mouth waggled in shaking up and down, and painfully he lisped out, Ah, most worthy Miss Stawbaum, excellent friend, how can I thank you for all? Yes, no picture book, no Christmas frock shall you sacrifice for me. Procure me only a sword, and I will answer the rest. Let him do his worst. Here Nutcracker's speech died away, and his eyes, lately animated by the expression of inward grief, became again fixed and dull as glass. Mary felt no horror. Rather, she skipped for joy, now knowing she means to save Nutcracker without further sore sacrifices. But whatever was she to get a sword for the small man? She resolved to take Fred into counsel that evening, her parents having gone out. As these two sat together in the parlor by the glass cupboard, she told him all that had happened to her with the Nutcracker and the Mouse King, and what was now required of the former's deliverance. Nothing of all this made much impression on Fred, as how, according to Mary's report, his housers had behaved themselves so badly in battle. He just asked very seriously whether things had really gone as she said. And when she assured him on her word that it was so, he went on at once to the cupboard, addressed his Hausers with a moving speech, then, as a punishment for their selfishness and cowardice, cut the cockades off their hats, one after another, and forbade them to play Hauser Guards march for a year. His reprimand ended, he turned to Mary, saying, "As for the sword, I can supply Nutcracker, for yesterday I pensioned off an old colonel of the Crusaders who does not need his sword any more." The said colonel was enjoying the pension assigned to him by Fred in the back corner of the top shelf. Thence, being fetched down, his smart silver-mounted sword was taken off him and hung around the waist of the Nutcracker. That night Mary could not sleep for anxious dread. At midnight she thought she could hear in the parlor a strange stir, a clank, a confusion. All of a sudden it went squeak. "The Mouse King! The Mouse King!" cried Mary, and sprang, startled, out of bed. All was still, but soon there came a soft, soft tapping at the door, and a tiny voice made itself heard. "Dearest Miss Stahlbaum, how can now you can be at ease? Good, joyful news." Mary recognized the voice of young Josselmere, threw on her dress, and hurriedly opened the door. Outside of it stood little Nutcracker, the dripping sword of his right hand, a wax light in his left. As soon as he saw Mary, he knelt down on one knee and spoke thus: "You alone, my lady, are she who steeled my heart with courage and gave my arms strength to combat the haughty foe that dared insult you. Conquered lies and treacherous Mouse King, and wallows in his blood. Scorn not, O lady, to receive the tokens of victory at the hands of your till death devoted knight." With this, Nutcracker pulled off the 7 golden crowns of the Mouse King, strung them round his left arm, and handed them over to Mary, who received them with delight. Then, rising to his feet, he went on: "Ah, my dearest Miss Stahlbaum, having now overpowered my enemy, and wonderful things could not show you. What wonderful things I not show you, if you would only have the kindness to follow me a little way. Please do, oh, please do, dear young lady." Hey, WTF, joining the Spirit Clan. What's going on? It's good to see you, friend. Sound of Power now, dinner time, story time with Kev, Leighton cooking the meat on the barbie, doing everything else. That's incredible. You have such good grandkids. It is good to see you, WTF. We are reading all about the Nutcracker and the Mouse King, the story that inspired the classic Nutcracker tale. I think we can finish it within the 3-hour mark, so I think we're just going to finish it, y'all. I'll go as long as I can, though. The words are starting to bleed together. But I am really happy to see you all. 25 likes. Let's go. Chapter 12, The Toy Kingdom. None of you children, I believe, would have hesitated about following the noble, good-hearted Nutcracker, who had no harm in his thoughts. Mary consented the more willingly, as she knew well what a great claim she had upon Nutcracker's gratitude, and felt sure he would keep his word, and would show her some splendid things. So she answered, "I will go with you, Herr Drosselmeyer, but it must not be far or for long, as I have not slept nearly enough." "On that account," replied Nutcracker, "I take the nearest way through a somewhat difficult one." The nearest way, though a somewhat difficult one. Forward he strode, and Mary after him, till he stopped before a great old clothes-press standing on the floor. To her astonishment, Mary perceived that the door of this usually locked-up press was open, so that she quite plainly saw her father's fur traveling cloak, which hung right in front. Nutcracker cleverly climbed up the braidings and trimmings of it, till he could catch hold of the big tassel dangling by a thick cord on the back of the fur. As soon as he had given this tassel a strong pull, through the sleeves of the cloak came down an elegant cedar wood staircase. "Will you please go up here, my dearest young lady?" says Nutcracker. Mary did so. Then, scarcely had she mounted through, the sleeves scarcely got up to the collar when a dazzling light streamed into her eyes, and all at once she found herself on a delightfully scented meadow, from which rose millions of sparks like gleaming gems. "We are now on Sugar Candy Meadow," said Nutcracker, "but will at once pass through that gate." Now, as Mary looked, she was aware of a beautiful gate, which rose on the meadow only a few steps before them. It seemed to be all built of white marble, dotted with brown and raisin-colored patches. But on coming nearer, Mary saw clearly that the whole mass consisted of almonds and raisins baked together in sugar, for which reason, Nutcracker informed her, the gate they were about to pass through was named the Almond and Raisin Gate. Common people vulgarly called it the Schoolboy Grub Gate. In a covered passage leading out from this gate, apparently built of barley sugar, 6 little monkeys dressed in red jackets were making the most beautiful music from cymbals and triangles that was ever heard, so that Mary scarcely noticed how she advanced on the marble flags, which were nothing else than an elegantly polished mosaic of sugar plums. Soon rose about them a very sweet smell, given forth by a wonderful wood that opened out on both sides. In the shady glade was such a bright sparkling and glittering that it could be plainly seen how gold and silver fruit hanging from the brightly colored stems, and how trunks and branches were all adorned with ribbons and nosegays like the guests at a joyful wedding party. And when the scent of oranges stirred as a rising breeze, there was a whispering through the leaves and twigs, and the tinsel rustled and rattled so that it all sounded like merry music, to the tune of which the shining little lamps kept hopping and dancing. "Ah, how lovely it is here!" cried Mary, enraptured with pleasure. "We are in Christmas Tree Wood, dear miss," said Nutcracker. "Oh," went on Mary, "if only might stay here a little. Oh, it's so beautiful." Nutcracker clapped his little hands, and forthwith came up some small shepherds and shepherdesses, hunters and huntresses, who looked so frail and white that one could believe them made of pure sugar. But Mary, though they were wandering through the wood, had not yet noticed them. They brought out the dearest little armchair, all made of gold, laid a cushion of licorice upon it, and very politely invited Mary to sit down. As soon as she had done so, the shepherds and shepherdesses performed a very graceful dance, for which the hunters blew a tune in quite correct style, and then they all disappeared in the underwood. "So you will excuse them, most worthy Miss Stallbaum," said Nutcracker. "You will excuse their dance going off so badly. But these people all work upon strings, and must always keep on doing the same thing. And if the hunters played so sleepily and flat, there are reasons also for that. The sugar basket was indeed hanging over their heads in the Christmas tree, but rather out of their reach. Shall we not go on a little further?" "Ah, but it was all very pretty, and pleased me very much," said Mary, as she got up and followed Nutcracker, going on in front. Their course lay along a sweet rippling, purling brook, out of which seemed to rise rich odors that filled the whole wood. "It is the orange brook," said Nutcracker, in answer to her inquiry. "Yet apart from its fine scent, it is nothing for size and beauty to the lemonade river that likewise falls on the coconut milk sea." In fact, Mary soon caught the stronger sound of rushing and dashing, and came in sight of the broad lemonade river, whose noble gray-tinted waves wound their way through the glowing green wood, lighted up by carbuncles. A singularly fresh, bracing coolness was exhaled by this splendid water. Not far off there rolled slowly by a dull yellow stream that sent out an uncommonly sweet smell, on the banks of which sat all sorts of pretty little children who were fishing for small thick fish, and ate them up as soon as caught. On coming nearer, Mary remarked that these fish looked like filberts. Some little way up this stream lay a very nice village, houses, barns, church, parsonage, all dark brown, with smart gilded roofs, and many of the walls were colored, as if citron peeled and almond kernels had been stuck onto them. That, said Nutcracker, is gingerbread ham, which lies on Honeyburn. Some very pretty people live there, but they are mostly in low spirits because they suffer much from toothache, so we will keep away from it. Just then Mary perceived another little town, which consisted of nothing but gaily tinted transparent houses, and was most beautiful to look at. Nutcracker went straight towards it, and now Mary heard a wild cheery din, and saw how 1,000 dwarf fish folk were in the act of examining and unloading many high-packed wagons, which stood in the market-place. But what they took out of these wagons appeared nothing but brightly colored papers, and the silver coverings of chocolate sticks. "We are in Bonbons Town now," said Nutcracker, "and there has just arrived a convoy sent from Paperland by the Chocolate King. The poor people of Bonbon Town have recently been seriously threatened by the Fly Sultan's army, on which account they are covering their houses with the supplies from Paperland and throwing up fortifications of the strong materials which the Chocolate King sends them. But, dear Miss Stahlbaum, we will not visit all the small towns and villages of this country. On to the capital! To the capital!" Quickly hastened Nutcracker forward and Mary after him, full of curiosity. Before long, a rich perfume of roses greeted them, and all the air seemed filled with soft waving rose tints. Mary saw that this was the reflection of the rose-red shining river, whose rosily silver ripples purled and prattled before her as if keeping time and melody. On this lovely water that gradually spread out into a lake swam noble silver-white swans with golden bands around their necks, and sang the most beautiful songs against each other for a wager, to the tune of which little diamond fishes ducked up and down through the rose water as in a merry dance. "Ah!" cried Mary, quite excited. "This is really the lake which Godfather Drosselmeier once promised to make for me, and I myself am the girl who is to play with the darling swans." Nutcracker gave such a scornful laugh as she had never heard him do, and said, "A thing like this your godfather can never manufacture. Don't you trouble about that, however, but let us sail over the Rose Lake to the capital city on the other side." I have glasses, actually. Best part when you change into voice of character. Appreciate that. That happens automatically. I realized I can't control it. Everybody will get their own voice. Chapter 13, The Capital of Toyland. The little Nutcracker again clapped his small hands, and then the Rose Lake grew more agitated. The waves washed higher on the shore, and Mary saw coming towards her from a distance a boat or floating chariot in the form of a shell, like one glowing, sun-bright, sparkling gem, drawn along by 2 gold-scaled dolphins. 12 dear little Moors, dressed in caps and pinafores woven out of humming-bird feathers, sprang on shore and carried first Mary, then Nutcracker, softly passing over the waves into the boat. Oh, how nice it was when Mary drove off through the rose spray and the rose waves. The 2 golden-scaled dolphins lifted up their heads and spouted crystal jets high into the air, and as they fell back in gleaming and sparkling rainbows, 2 sweet voices, like little bells of silver, seemed to be singing. "Who sails upon the rosy sea? A darling fairy it must be. Little fly, shoo, shoo. Little fish, boo, boo. Swans, ta-ta. Goldfinch, tra-la. Stream run low, wind soft blow. All peace today, for here comes a fay." But the little Moors who had jumped up on the back of the chariot appeared not to like the singing of the water jets, for they kept shaking their parasols so that the date palm leaves, of which these were made, rattled and rustled, and at the same time the whole 12 stamped with their feet to an odd kind of tune and sang for their part, "Clack, click, click, clack, up and down, black boys like a noise, fish jump, swans flap, shell coach rumble jumble tumble, up and down and up, click, clack, clack, click." Moors are very merry people, said Nutcracker, somewhat put out by their din, but they will set the whole lake in an uproar if they go on so. Indeed, there soon broke loose a confused tumult of extraordinary voices, which seemed to be floating all around in the air and the water. Yet Mary did not mind them, but looked hard down into the scent rose waves, out of which a sweet, pleasant girl's face smiled back at her. Ah, she cried joyfully, clapping her little hands. Ah, just look, Herr Drosselmeyer. Down there is the Princess Pirlipat, who smiles at me gracefully. Do look, dear Herr Drosselmeyer. But Nutcracker sighed, almost mournfully, and said, Oh, dearest Miss Stawbaum, that is not the Princess Pirlipat. That is always and only yourself, always and only your own pretty face that smiles so sweetly out of the rose waves. At this, Mary quickly drew her head back, shut her eyes tight, and felt much ashamed. Next moment she was lifted out of the shell chariot and carried on shore by the 12 black boys. She found herself in a small thicket, almost more beautiful than the Christmas tree wood. So brightly did everything here shine and glitter, especially admirable being the foreign fruits that hung on all the trees, and were not only of singular colors, but also had a wonderful fine smell. This is Confection Grove, Nutcracker told her, but there is the capital. What now did Mary see? How shall I attempt to describe it to you, dear children? The beauty and splendor of the city, which stretched itself far over a flowery plain before her eyes, not only were the walls and towers gay with the most splendid color, but the form of buildings was such as you never saw on earth, for instead of a thatch, the houses had beautifully carved crowns at the top of them, and the towers were capped by the most lovely gay garlands ever seen, like the ornaments of a wedding cake. When they passed through the gate, which looked as if they were built of macaroons and candied fruit, a band of silver-papered soldiers presented arms, and a little man in a brocaded dress gown threw his arms round Nutcracker's neck with the word, Welcome, noble prince, welcome to Confectionery Berry. Confectioner Berry. Mary was not a little astonished, for to see young Drosselmeyer recognized as a prince by this highly distinguished person. But now she heard a confused outburst of tiny voices mingling together. Such a cheering and laughing, such a playing and singing that she could not think of nothing else, and asked the little Nutcracker what this meant. Oh, my good Miss Stawbaum, answered he, this is nothing remarkable. Confectionerberry is a prosperous, lively city, and every day some kind of amusement goes on here. But be pleased to come a little farther. A few steps brought them out upon the great marketplace, which presented a splendid sight. All the houses round it were of open sugar-work. Story rising over story, in the middle stood a tall sugar-coated cake tree, like a monument, and on each side of this very skillfully made fountain sprouted the air lemonade, ginger beer, and other nice drinks, while into the basin below ran pure rich cream, which you might spoon up at once without any further trouble. But prettier than all were the dear little people who swarmed around by thousands in and out, hurrahing and laughing and joking and singing, in short, rising that merry din which Mary had already heard from some way off. There were finely dressed ladies and gentlemen, Arabs and Greeks, Highlanders and Indians, officers and soldiers, shepherds and sailors, grand Turks and tomfools, harlequins and columbines. In fact, all kinds of people you'd find in the world. At one corner the tumult grew greater. The people thronged together, for just then the Grand Mogul had himself carried by a palanquin, attended by 93 grandees of his realm, and by 700 slaves. But it happened that at the other corner of the guild of fishermen, 500 strong, were holding their festival, and it was a pity that at the very same time the Turkish Sultan had the idea of taking a ride over the marketplace with 3,000 janissaries, and yet another solemn procession, clanging and chorusing, crowded around the cake tree. What a pressing and pushing and shoving and quarreling then came about. Soon, too, there were many cries of distress, for in the crush of fishermen had knocked off a Brahmin's head, and the Grand Mogul was nearly upset by a tomfool. Wilder and wilder rose the din, and the crowds were already falling to blows, when that man in the brocade gown and who was at the gate had greeted Nutcracker as prince, climbed up on the cake tree, and after 3 times ringing a very clear tinkling bell, called out thrice, "Confectioner! Confectioner! Confectioner!" At once the tumult was calmed, every one trying to escape from the confusion as best he could, and when the entangled processions got clear of each other, the muddied Grand Mogul had been brushed clean, and the Brahmin's head set on right again. The merrier uproar broke out forth anew. "What does it mean, that confectioner, dear Herr Dosselmeyer?" asked Mary. "Ah, my good Miss Stawbaum," answered Nutcracker, "confectioner is the name given here to an unknown but very dreadful power, of which people believe that it can do with them what it will. It is the fate that rules over this little merry folk, and they fear it so much that through the mere mention of its name the greatest tumult can be appeased, as Mr. Burgermaster has just shown us. Everyone then thinks no more of earthly things, and pushes into the ribs and bumps on the head, but retires into himself and asks seriously, what is man, and what is his destiny?" Mary could not restrain a loud cry of wonder, nay, of the highest amazement, when she all at once saw standing before her, bathed in rosy light, a brightly lighted castle with 100 magnificent towers. Here and there the walls were decorated with rich bouquets of violets, lilies, tulips, stocks, and the likes, the duller tints of which set off the dazzling white of the groundwork shimmering in rosy light. The great dome of the central building, as well as the pyramid-formed caps of the towers, were dotted with thousands of sparkling gold and silver stars. "Now we are before Rock Castle," said Nutcracker. Mary was quite overwhelmed by the view of the enchanted palace, yet she did not fail to notice that the summit of one of the great towers was wholly missing, which a gang of small mannikins standing on a scaffold of cinnamon sticks seemed engaged in restoring. Even before she could ask Nutcracker the meaning of this, he went on. "A short time ago this fine castle was exposed to serious danger, if not utter destruction. The giant Guzzle, happening to pass by, hit one tower right off and was already gnawing at the great dome when the confectionerberry people brought him the whole quarter of their city as tribute, and a good slice of Jamshire as well, with which he consented to be fed off and went on his way." At this moment a soft pleasing strain of music was heard. The gate of the castle opened, and out stepped 12 small pages bearing lighted cloves in their hands by way of torches. Their heads consisted of a single pearl, their bodies of rubies and emeralds, and so they walked along very fine upon little feet of pure gold. They were followed by 4 ladies almost as large as Mary's doll Clara, but so extraordinarily majestic and gorgeously arrayed that not for a single moment could Mary mistake them for anything but born princesses. "Oh, my prince! Oh, my dear prince! Oh, my brother!" they exclaimed, embracing Nutcracker in the tenderest manner, and one could not be sure whether they were about to laugh or to cry for joy. Nutcracker seemed to be much moved. He wiped away a crowd of tears from his eyes, took Mary by the hand, and spoke movingly. "This is Miss Mary Stawbaum, the daughter of the most respectable physician, and the preserver of my life. Had she not thrown her slipper at the right time, had she not furnished me with the sword of the pensioned crusader colonel, I should now be lying in my grave, bitten to pieces by the accursed Mouse King. Oh, this, Miss Stawbaum, tell me, is Pirlipat, even though a princess by birth, her equal in beauty, heart, and virtue? No, I say no." "No!" cried all the ladies, and fell upon Mary's neck, sobbing out, "Oh, you noble preserver of our dear princely brother, excellent Miss Stawbaum!" Now the ladies led Mary and Nutcracker within the castle and into a hall, the walls of which were of clear sparkling and glowing crystal. But what pleased Mary above all the rest was the dearest little chairs, tables, sofas, and so forth standing round about, which were made of cedar or mahogany wood, inlaid with gold flowers. The princesses requested Mary and Nutcracker to sit down, and said that they themselves would at once get a meal ready. Then they brought out a number of little pots and dishes made of the finest Japan porcelain, also spoons, knives, and forks, graters, stew pans, and other kitchen utensils of gold and silver. Next, they brought out the most beautiful fruits and sugar stuffs, such as Mary had never seen, and in the most elegant manner, with their small snow-white hands, began to peel the fruit, to pound the spices, to rub down the sugar sticks, in short, so to play the housewife that Mary could well see how these princesses were at home in the kitchen, and what a rich meal was to be set before her. Feeling conscious that she could show herself mistress of such matters, she secretly wished the princesses would let her assist in their work. As if she had guessed Mary's wish, the most beautiful of Nutcracker's sisters reached over to her a small gold mortar with the words, "Oh, sweet friend, dear preserver of my brother, please break a little bit of this sugar stick." While Mary now pounded away at the mortar so heartily that it sounded quite pleasant, as if a pretty tune were being chimed forth, Nutcracker began to relate in full how the grim battle between his army and the Mouse King's had gone, how he had been beaten through the cowardice of his troops, how then the hateful Mouse King would have bitten him all to pieces, and how therefore Mary had been obliged to sacrifice many of his subjects, persons in her service, etc., etc. During this narrative, it seemed to Mary as if his words, even her own strokes in the mortar, grew fainter and stranger. Soon she saw a silver floor rising up like thin clouds of mist, in which floated the princesses and pages, Nutcracker, her own self. Her ears were filled with a queer singing and ringing and burning that died away. In the distance, now she rose upon swelling waves higher and higher, higher and higher, higher and higher. Hey, Darker Bunnies, what's going on? Have a great sleep, fam. Peace, love, and Pokemon. All right, Chapter 14. Conclusion. Purr, puff! Down fell Mary from a measureless height. That was a fall. But at once she opened her eyes, and there she lay on her little bed in clear daylight, and her mother stood beside her, saying, "How can you sleep so long? Breakfast has been ready long ago." You take notice, honored reader, that Mary, quite bewildered by all the wonderful things she saw, had at last fallen asleep in the hall of the rock castle, and that the black boys or the pages or the princesses with their own hands must have brought her home and put her to bed. "Oh, mother dear, mother, wherever is young Herr Drosselmeyer taken me through the night? Wherever has young Herr Drosselmeyer taken me through the night? What fine things I have seen!" Then she told the whole story almost exactly as I have told it to you, and her mother looked at her in amazement. "Dear Mary," said her mother when she came to an end, "you have had a long, beautiful dream, but now shake all that out of your head." Mary obstinately stuck to it that she had not been dreaming, but had really seen all this. So her mother took her to the glass cupboard, brought down Nutcracker from the third shelf where he stood as usual, and said, "How can you, silly child, believe that these wooden figures from Nuremberg are alive and able to move by themselves?" "But, dear mother," broke in Mary, "I know very well the small Nutcracker is young Herr Drosselmeyer of Nuremberg, Godfather Drosselmeyer's nephew." At this, both her father and mother broke into a loud peal of laughter. "Ah," Mary went on, almost in tears, "now you're laughing at my Nutcracker? Dear father, and yet he spoke so well of you. For when we came to Rock Castle and he introduced me to the princesses, his sisters, he said you are a very respectable physician." Louder still was the laughing, in which Louisa joined, and even Fred. Then Mary ran into the next room, made haste to bring out of her small treasure box the 7 crowns of the Mouse King, and handed them to her mother with, Just see here. These are the Mouse King's 7 crowns, which last night young Drosselmeyer presented to me as tokens of his victory. With astonishment, the doctor's wife examined the little crowns, which were so skillfully made out of very bright metal, quite unfamiliar to her, that they seemed the work of no human hands. The doctor, too, took a good long look at them, and both father and mother seriously urged Mary to confess how she had come by these crowns. But she would only stand by what she had said, and when her father grew stern with her, even scolded her as a little storyteller, she began to cry bitterly and lament. Ah, poor child that I am, what else can I say? At that moment the door opened, and in walked the counselor, calling out, "What is the matter? My godchild Mary crying and sobbing? What's the matter? What's the matter?" The doctor told him the whole story, showing him the little crowns. No sooner had the counselor set his eyes on them than he laughed and said, "Silly stuff, silly stuff. These are charms which long ago I used to wear on my watch chain. And I gave them to Mary as a present on her birthday when she was 2 years old. Don't you know them again?" Neither the doctor nor his wife remembered them. But when Mary saw that the faces of her parents had become friendly again, she sprang upon Godfather Drosselmeyer with a cry. "Oh, Godfather, you know all about it. Do tell them yourself that my Nutcracker is your nephew, the young heir Drosselmeyer from Nuremberg, and that he gave me the little crowns." "Stupid, silly stuff," murmured the counselor, making an ugly face. Then her mother made Mary stand before her and spoke very seriously. "Just listen to me, Mary. You must have done with all these fancies and absurdities. And if you say again that the common mishap Nutcracker is the nephew of Mr. Counselor, I will not only throw Nutcracker out of the window, but also all the rest of your toys, Miss Clare too." Now indeed poor Mary could no longer speak of that which filled her whole mind, for you may well suppose that such splendid and beautiful things as had happened to her are not to be forgotten. But Fred turned his back on her when she tried to tell him of the wonderful land in which she had been so fortunate. He is said even to have whispered "silly goose" at her, but the good nature he showed at other times will not let me believe this. Yet so much is certain that since he no longer put any faith in Mary's story, he formally, on open parade, retracted the wrong done to his Hausers, gave them, instead of their lost cockades, much higher and finer feathers from the goose quill, and permitted them to play the Hauser Guards march again. Well, we know what courage these Hausers had shown when the mouse balls came whirling out of the red waistcoats. Mary might speak no more of her adventure, but that marvelous fairy kingdom still hovered around her in sweetly fleeting visions and beautiful echoes. She saw all its glories once more as soon as she fixed her mind on the remembrance of them, and so it came about that instead of playing as she used to do, she would sit still and silent, her thoughts far away, till everybody found fault with her for a little dreamer. It happened that, as the counselor was one day mending a clock in her father's house, Mary sat before the glass cupboard, deep in her dreams looking at Nutcracker, and she could not help bursting out aloud. "Oh, dear Herr Drosselmeyer, if you were really alive, I would not behave like Princess Pirlipat and despise you, when you for my sake had ceased to be a handsome young man." "Eh, eh, silly stuff," exclaimed the counselor. Then at that moment came such a crack and a jerk that Mary tumbled, fainting, from her chair. When she came to herself again, her mother was petting her and saying, "How could you tumble from your chair? Such a big girl." Here's the nephew of the counselor come from Nuremberg, so you must be nice and well behaved." She looked up. The counselor had again put on his glass wig and his drab coat, and was smiling very agreeably. And he held by the hand a small but well-formed young man. His little face was as white and red as milk and blood. He wore a fine red coat laced with gold, white silk stockings and pumps, and stuck in his bosom a most beautiful nosegay, was most elegantly curled and powdered, and behind his back His hair hung done up in a bag. The little sword by his side seemed to be all jewels and glittered so, and the small hat under his arm was wove out of flakes of silk. The young man lost no time in showing what pleasant manners he had, for he gave Mary a quantity of splendid playthings, especially the most lovely toffee that some figures as the Mouse King had bitten to pieces. But for Fred he had brought a wonderfully fine sword. At table the polite visitor cracked nuts for the whole party. The hardest could not withstand him. This was right hand. With his right hand he stuck them in his mouth. With his left he pulled up his head. Crack! The nut fell to pieces. Mary blushed rose red as she looked at the nice young man, and she became still redder when, after dinner, young Drosselmeyer invited her to go with him to the glass cupboard in the parlor. Pray play prettily together then, children, said the counselor. I have no objection, as all my clocks are now in order. As soon as young Drosselmeyer found himself alone with Mary, he knelt down upon one knee and spoke thus. Ah, my dearest Miss Strawbaum, you see here at your feet the fortunate man whose life you saved on this very spot. You were good enough to say that you would not despise me, as that nasty Princess Pirlipat did, if I became hideous for your sake. Now I am no more a common nutcracker, but have received again my original, not unpleasing form. Oh, excellent young lady, bestow upon me your precious hand. Share with me my crown and kingdom. Reign with me in Rock Castle, for there now I am king. Mary Rose raised the youth to his feet and said softly, Dear Herr Drosselmeyer, you are a good-natured, kind-hearted man, and you also reign over a delightful land with very pretty, amusing people. So I take you for my husband. So then Mary and Drosselmeyer became at once betrothed. When the engagement had lasted a year, he is said to have fetched her away in a gold coach drawn by silver horses. At the wedding dance, 22,000 of the splendidest puppets decked out in pearls and diamonds, and Mary is now queen of a country in which sparkling Christmas tree wood, transparent coffee palaces, in short, the finest and most wonderful things are everywhere to be seen by those who will only have eyes to see them. And so ends the story of the Nutcracker and the Mouse King. Well, what did you guys think? Appreciate y'all letting me finish it at least. I'm not gonna lie, I got chills when his nephew leaned down and talked to the little girl. Like, oh my god, it was real. Yep, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that was a really good story. I really, really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. The first one too, although the ending was a little bit sad. I did enjoy it. But without further ado, the Nutcracker. I was the Nutcracker and the Mouse King. And now I might have to watch the ballet and see exactly what they portrayed, because I'd love to see a giant seven-headed Mouse King. But tonight, what I get to do is I get to schedule my day 3 of Ghostmas coming out tomorrow, and another channel of which we can help grow. Just a reminder, y'all, in order to enter into those giveaways, you do have to leave a comment on the other pages video, of which I put in the description. So I am really looking forward to this, y'all. Going to be running it all week, and then Christmas night we're going to come together, and we're going to run that comment picker on all 12 of those videos, and we're gonna dish them out together. So plus I'll have a bunch of other stuff here too, so we can have a really good stream on Christmas night. So howdy, Ernie. I hope you're doing well, fam. We are just wrapping up, so I can get the rest of my dinner eaten, and then I can get to producing. But I really, really do appreciate you all coming through. I certainly did miss reading with you all on Mondays, so I was really looking forward to this. And what we'll do is, that's all right, Ernie. That is allowed in my stream. You are allowed to fall asleep. We are actually just going to look for someone to raid, kinda. I don't know if my redirects have been working lately, but we're just going to keep redirecting until it does happen to work. Is that Next? Is Next streaming right now? Got Jay's Corner. Next, I think he's just test streaming though. Just testing it out. Ooh, Eric Rit. Oh, that's upcoming. I was like, Eric is live. Let's rate him. All right. Any suggestions on where we want to go? That was awesome, Uncle Kev. We're eating dinner, and we love the story of his family. Aw, I love that. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here and listening. You are absolutely loved. I love you all. Thank you so much, and I hope you have an incredible rest of your day. Stafford is live. He's gaming. Excellent. Is there anybody? Oh, you know what? Chaos is live. Yep, Chaos is live. Let's go bless Chaos. I have something in the works for Mr. Stafford, so. And you know I love y'all. This is 5150. But we're going to try, of course, to go and raid Chaos. He was in here not too long ago. He had mentioned that he was going to midstream raid us, but I think we're going to get the jump on him. I most likely will not be there too long. Okay. Hi, sorry. Hi, Lori. Sorry for what? Don't be sorry. See you next time. Indeed, we will be live again on Thursday, y'all. Be sure to check out the short tomorrow so that you can be entered for a chance to win day 3. But always remember, y'all, to go out and get everything that you set out to get, and don't let anything stop you. But it takes $0 to be a good person. So always do it through peace, love, and Pokemon. And thank you all for believing in ghosts. I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your night. Let's go raid Chaos. If it doesn't redirect you automatically, I apologize, but I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your night, and we will see you next time.